Okay, so this is going to be a big one and something I've never done on this channel before. We're going to build a full stack GenAI application. This is the final result where users can ask questions and the answers will be grounded in hundreds of documents that we will all set up within a database. But the beauty of this is that we're going to cover the entire architecture, something you rarely see on YouTube. We'll cover the front end, the back end, the database connection, and the ingestion and RAG pipeline, and how everything ties together. So if you want to get into AI engineering or simply want to get better at this is really the best video for you. I'm going to share my entire process of what we do inside our AI development company. So I'm going to show you how we set up the repository, the agent.md files, which packages and tools we use, and how we deploy everything and tie everything together. And I'm probably going to condense about 40 hours of learning or so into this 4-hour video. But now that does come with a disclaimer. This is not going to be a beginner-friendly step-by-step click here, then click here. No, I'm going to move at my natural pace. And I'm going to use AI agents. So if you want to follow along, we have the GitHub repository. The cool thing is I have this over here on the main branch. This is the starting point. So this is the almost empty repository that we're going to start from. But I also have the final result, which is the development branch. Now, if you want to move along, I recommend to clone the main branch and then start coding with me and follow along with me and kind of like augment and emulate the prompts that I use, which I will all show to you so you can follow along. Because if you go straight to the final result, you can also do that. You have a cool project, but you not really will learn anything. Now, next to that, if at any point you feel like this is going way too fast, I have no idea what's going on, just know that on my YouTube channel, for about every topic that we dive into, whether that's hybrid search for RAG, whether that's setting up agentic search, whether that's setting up like CI/CD pipelines and tying things together, I have videos for all of this. So if at any point we are in a certain section and it's completely new, completely foreign to you, you can't follow it, please go to my channel, find a video on that, and that's how you can kind of like go back and really accelerate your learning. Or of course, just ask AI, right? All the code is here. If you go to the development branch, everything that we work towards is here. As I go through the process, some of the things will be messy, right? This is not, I would say, a course. This is engineering in the real world. So sometimes I make mistakes. I get stuck. I have to debug things. I'll use AI to fix certain things. But you have the final results. There's the results that will run. And you can always like use AI to kind of like fact check, get back on track again, ask, what the hell am I doing? To hopefully give you a great learning experience and to give you a great portfolio project. So welcome and let's kick off this project. I got a fresh cup of coffee over here and I'm going to take you through the exact process that I follow whenever we take on client projects. So I've prepared the repository for you. Link will be in the description, of course, for you to follow along. We are currently on the main branch, which is also what I have open here inside Cursor. This is what we will be working from. Now, what I'm going to do as I'm going to progress with the project, I'm going to work on a development branch. So this main branch stays exactly the same. So you can take that as a starting point. But before we actually get our hands dirty, I want to take you through high level what we are going to do, because when you are using AI and AI agents, the better the initial prep work, the faster you can go really with these AI agents. So a lot of the setup and the things that I normally do when I set up a project have already been implemented here. So beyond just following this tutorial and learning from this video, this repo alone is probably going to be a game changer for you if you've never done something like this. So it includes the agents.md files, both in the top level as well as in the front-end folder and in the backend folder over here. Because what you'll find is we're going to set this project up as a mono repo, meaning that we have both our backend and our front-end in a single GitHub repository. And this works super well when you are using coding agents because they can reason over the entire context. So before diving into all of the nitty-gritty things, let's start with the actual client brief. What are we actually going to build? Why is this worth your time? So let's quickly cover this. So the whole idea of this video is to essentially create a hypothetical case study that is as close to what we see in the real world for you to kind of like simulate the ultimate learning experience. So we came up with this, or AI, of course, came up with this name, Driftwood Capital, which is an independent investment research firm. So I want to take you through this brief. It's not that long to understand what we're going to build, because any project really should, of course, start with a brief, whether that's something you came up with, someone within your company came up with, or an external client came up with. So the whole idea here is that this is a company, 40 analysts, and what they do, they sell deep equity research to institutional clients. Think of hedge funds, mutual funds, pension funds. So they sell this information. And they do this based on subscriptions, right? So they can earn good money with this. So they generate these reports where each analyst has to cover certain like public companies, and all these companies have to make their annual reports and even more reports. They have to make that available. So this is all public information that we can download. So we can use this to our advantage, so we can actually work with a relevant data set within this project. So a little bit about how they make money, how investment firms make money, or a research firm, I should say, and how they add value. So their clients, which are portfolio manager at the actual funds, they don't have the bandwidth to read every 10K, 10Q earning transcript and industry filings for the companies they invest in. So we are going to use the following data source. So this is from the US Security and Exchange Commission. And here we can, via an API, download all of these filings. Now, I've already prepared the repository for you with a download file. So let's start there first. So it's going to be interactive, right? So instead of just reading this entire document first, let's already actually have a look at the data so we can start to get the feel for what is this going to look like, and what we're going to put in our system to actually ask questions about, and what to reason about. So I added in the downloads, in the data folder, I edited this download.py file. And if you follow the instructions here in the README, in order to follow along, you're going to need a couple of dependencies. So we're going to use Python, and I recommend to run Python using UV. And then later also we need nodes, and we're going to need PMPM. So the first thing, in order to download the files, pretty much, we can use this file over here. So if I open up a new terminal, let's see, we're already here in the download folder. So if you were to open this up in like a clean project, you would probably open up your terminal in the root of the project, and then you would just cd into the data folder. And now what I can do is I can do UV run, and then I would do a download.py. So this is going to download all of the documents, and all of the documents in this case mean we are interested in the following tickers. So we do Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, and Google. So here you can see it's now going through it, and it's set up to nicely split this up into the years. So we download the last 5 years of data for all of these companies, and there's also a manifest.json, which pretty much is an index that reference, look, for this particular ticker, here are the dates, here are the filing date, and this is the local path URL. So now we have all of this data in here. So let's actually have a look at what this is, because these are, as you can see, HTML files. So this is not HTML. This was also actually a new thing for me, HTML files. It's a kind of HTML, but not really. So let's have a look at what this looks like. So I can say open this in the browser. I can do this here inside cursor, and we can see this. So which one do we got? We got the one from Apple from 2021, right? So as you can see, if I scroll down over here, this is a huge document. It's very long. It's got a lot of information. We got numbers, we got tables, we got earnings. So this is going to be a very interesting problem, of course, to start using AI to extract information from this. And the key thing here is going to be, how do we ensure that our AI agents are not going to start and hallucinate, right? Because this is a lot of information. We got a lot of years. So if you are not careful, the agent may come up and hallucinate certain facts, right? So we are going to counter that, and that's one of the most important things of this project. So if we then come back to the problem, right, from the client brief. So every analyst spends roughly half of every week, so half of their time, doing source document intake, meaning they go through all of these filings, they scan for the certain sections they care about. So they go through these documents that I just showed you. They copy and paste, so they create their manual reports, they take what they need, and they need to compare this year over year. And only after that intake work, they can produce an original analysis. So the intake, so the start is very boring, it's very repetitive. So every time there's a new company or new document, it's okay, what are we dealing with right now? Going through this again, reading, checking everything. So that's the process. And it's very repetitive across the analysts, right? Because they all have to do this, and they may all have their own kind of like way of doing things in their own like local files. So it's the single biggest drag on an output from an analyst. Because if we unlock this, if we can speed this up, they have more time to actually add value to clients. And that is by actually synthesizing information from those reports. So what they want, so this is ultimately the preferable situation after we implement a solution for them. They want some type of internal chatbot. You can call it the Document Copilot. That's what I'm going to refer to this project name within the example over here, where the analysts can ask questions in plain English about filling in Driftwood's curated corpus. So about any filing, I should say, sorry. So that's what they want. And then it's very important that they get a sourced answer that cites the specific file in a specific page. Here we have to understand that if the AI gives an answer, if it makes something up, which it's very easy for an AI to do that, we can get a faulty input, faulty analysis. And of course, that can be a very costly mistake for an institution like Driftwood Capital. So we always want to make sure that we reference sources so we can backtrack and fact check to, okay, where does this actually come from? So that we can also instruct the client when we implement this first proof of concept for them to say, look, here's how the tool works, but your analysts are still responsible, of course, for the output and for fact checking. So we should use this tool as a way to speed up and accelerate their work, to do a lot of the heavy lifting and the plumbing, but not solely rely on it. Maybe we can grow towards something like that. But in the beginning, we need to be sure that we can fact check this. So we really like what they want. The answer, it needs to be trustworthy enough to base downstream analysis on it. So we need to engineer the whole application around that. And it should be they should be able to use it from the browser when they are logged in with their Driftwood email address. So this is something else, right? So we're going to make this available as an application that runs in the browser, and I'm going to show you how to deploy this and how to really set this up with an actual login. That is going to be really the extra mile on top of what you normally see in other tutorials. That's why this will be like an end-to-end project. And they also want to see their own past conversations. So really think of it as their own internal ChatGPT, right? And you may be wondering like, okay, but why wouldn't they just use something like ChatGPT or Copilot or any other of the tools that are available out there? And what you'll find is when you are working with clients, especially once they go bigger in size, there are two major things. So first of all, a big issue is privacy, compliance, and security. So for most companies of any reasonable size, it is simply just a no-go to let everyone pretty much use ChatGPT and just plug the data in there. That is just off the charts. You cannot do that. So you need to be way more strict about how you handle your data, where it can actually be stored, what it can be shared with, and then usually you would set something up because you still need to use a language model, right? So that's the only thing that needs to be whitelisted. But you would either do that through AWS, through Bedrock, or through Microsoft Azure, and you actually get an enterprise ready, if you will, endpoint with very specific data policies. That's usually the only way that you can get an application like this approved in enterprise environments. So that's one thing. Now, number two is the customization layer. Almost any off-the-shelf tool that is currently available on the market, whether that's Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, they're generic tools. Anyone can use it. And now, yes, you can give some prompts, you can use some skills, but if you want to use an application like this really as part of your organization, as part of your strategy, where you say, look, we got 40 analysts and they all use this tool, you need to standardize it and you need to add custom features on top of the generic tools, because otherwise you'll always get generic output. If I take all of these documents that you see over here and I chuck them into ChatGPT and I'm going to start asking questions about it, like within a matter of minutes, if you let 5 analysts use that, they will all get different answers. It will start to hallucinate and it will just get messy because everyone uses the tool a little bit different. And also these tools are not really, these off-the-shelf tools are also not great at handling really large volumes of data, because you pretty much put everything in the context window and that is quickly going to burn out. And I know Microsoft Copilot can link to SharePoint and all of that, but it's bad. It's really, really bad. So those are the two arguments as to why this is still a necessary step and a necessary application for a lot of companies, and why I wanted to showcase this, because if you understand how to set this up, you will learn how to work with a backend, you will learn how to work with the front end, how to connect them, and engineer everything together following rigid AI engineering principles, as well as RAG and information retrieval techniques on top of that. So that's why this is worthwhile to go through. And like I've said, if you follow this, it will be a great portfolio project, and I'm sure you'll understand like the end-to-end full-stack engineering around everything better than most people out there. So that's what they want, and also why they want it and why it's relevant. Now, then some example analyst questions. I won't go through all of these, but think of it like this, right? So let's consider Apple. So across 2021 to 2025, how did the revenue mix between the iPhone, the services, the Mac, and the iPad, and the wearables change? And which category appears to have contributed most to any mix shift? Now, that is a pretty deep question. Like, if you have to do this without AI across all of these documents, you're going to have to do some digging, right? So that gives you a sense of what we're going to work towards. And I have that's the funny thing about this project. I have no idea how this is going to turn out because I haven't built this. I've set up the project, but I haven't built this before. Okay, so then what the trust means, right? So pretty much we always want to have citations, no hallucinations, of course, show the underlying sequence or passage where things are coming from. And then out of scope for now. So this is not going to be trading recommendations. We're not going to use any external data beyond what we put in the system. No multi-tenant or multi-client setup, no billing plans or paywalls, no mobile app. So the definition of done of this project, which we're going to work towards, is where a pilot group of analysts can actually use this application in the browser and start working with it, and it should at least save them 3 hours per week. That's the client brief. That's the starting point. So with that introduction out of the way, let's come back to the project one more time and make you a little bit more familiar with what we got going on over here. So first of all, if you haven't already and you want to follow along, make sure that you have all of the prerequisites set up, right? So by now, I've just shown you how you can download the data. We got that in there. Make sure you have Python. You should already have that now. Node and PnPM. Other than that, we are going to use a couple of different services also to actually deploy this. So we're going to use Supabase for our database. We're going to use a hosted project there. This can all be done for free. And then later, we're also going to use Railway to deploy our solution. And now this is going to be an interesting one. I have never used Railway. And I'm going to show you how to use it while I am also going through this. Why? I did some research, and for this example, it's going to be the easiest to show you how to do this, still creating a production app, but still keeping it easy. So when we do our client projects, we always use some of the major cloud providers like AWS or Azure, or we work directly on Hetzner, but that is a little bit too deep for a tutorial like this. And trust me, this will already blow your mind and go really deep, but if we have to add that as well, that will simply be too much. So Railway, that is also something that we are going to use. And now let's come back over here. Let's talk a little bit about the project structure, right? So we got the backend and the front-end folders that are going to be separated. I also have an agents.md file in here. So this is going to instruct the AI agent that we're going to use how we like to work and what we want to use. So this is going to be injected into every system prompt. And I'm going to use Cursor for this. It doesn't really matter if you use Claude Code or Codex. Like if you want to follow along using Claude Code, I'm not sure if Claude Code already imports agents.md. You might want to swap that out to Claude.md file. So what you would do is you would literally simply set it up like this and then just turn this into a Claude.md. So that is something that you can do. But for Cursor, if you come in here and we go actually to my settings, you can see that if you go to rules, skills, and sub-agents, you can see that right now it has the agents.md. It loads that in automatically. Now, I have a bunch of skills installed, but these are mostly for MCP servers like Sentry. And I'm not going, and for Figma here, you can see I'm not going to use these. So I'm going to keep it really raw over here. And I'm also going to try and use little prompts to walk you through this. Let's actually start one up over here. Because the thing is, when you are working with these AI coding agents, there are a couple of ways that you can work with that. You can do like the huge, crazy big plans and then just let your AI work in the background for 2 hours. But I actually find that when you are working on a project and a problem that you are actually comfortable with and deeply understand, it's usually way faster to work in small incremental bite-sized prompts. And we can even like experiment with different models here. Probably most of the work I will use Composer 2.5 Fast from Cursor just because of how fast it is. This is not the best model. I would say the best model right now is GPT 5.5. As of today's recording, when you watch this, it's probably already different. But I'm going to show you and teach you really how you can work with AI in a way where it's really going to work together with you. Because what I see most people do nowadays is it's very easy to get lazy and to just offload a bunch of stuff and more to AI and simply don't even look at the code anymore. And yeah, while you can move very fast, you will also quickly just create a mess within your code base. And I don't care which skills you're using, like what prompts you're using and which models. If you don't have intermediate review points and decide what good looks like, it's going to get messy. Now, the setup over here, the agents.md, this is already really going to help. Because I already made a whole bunch of the decisions for us based on literally the past 3 years of working on projects like this. So for a backend, we're going to use Python and we're going to use FastAPI to create the API layer. For the front end, we're going to use a simple plain React single page application. We're going to build it out in TypeScript and we're going to use Fight to run the whole thing. Now for database, Supabase, then later we'll get into migrations and how we can actually create the database tables. Retrieval, we're going to use pgvector. For Auth, we're also going to use Supabase. We're going to use OpenAI for the large language models and the embeddings, and then hosting on Railway. Other than that, there are short rules over here on how I like to set up my projects, especially around minimizing dependencies. As you know, with all of the recent supply chain attacks, especially on NPM, this can really get messy, and we just like to set up our projects nowadays where we rely on dependencies as little as possible. Now, to go the extra mile with that, I've also, in the project setup already here in the backend, I've set up an npmrc file that PMPM is going to use, where we're even going to specify a minimum release age so that we cannot import, literally we cannot import packages that are younger than 7 days. So this is one guardrail really to protect ourselves. And then in the PyProject.toml, I also have it. So I'm going to say we use exact bounds for our dependencies and also exclude anything newer than 7 days. So that is most of the project setup that we have. And we also have files like this in the backend, agents.md. So here is another short file that pretty much guides the AI agents when we're working on the backend. And similar, we have that for the front end, the agents.md. And as you go through this, you might already be thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And like, yes, it is. Like the fact that I'm giving this away to you for free already is actually pretty crazy, because we've been optimizing this for 3 years, working on projects like this. And if you have this set up and just start to rip with AI, your results will already be so much better than someone who kind of like vibe codes things. So that's going to be exciting. Okay, now I notice I am aware that like this is a long kind of like introduction, but in my opinion, we can't jump around here and start skipping the fundamentals, because otherwise you have no idea what's going on. So that's why we need to spend some time here. There's one more document that I haven't covered, which is this is actually a big one. This is the whole architecture diagram that I already went ahead and kind of like put in here based on how all of these layers work together, right? Because it's one thing to say, look, we have a Python backend and we have a TypeScript frontend where we use React and we use Supabase, but it's also, okay, how does everything work together? And the architecture doc is something that we will keep coming back to. But for now, before we actually get moving and start to produce some code, here is the last thing that I want to go through. So this is the high-level architecture diagram, right? So you can start to get a sense for, first of all, like the complexity of this whole system, but also how everything works together. So everything starts from the user, right? I always like to reason from the user story. So an analyst goes to the browser, they open the app, and that is hosted via Railway. So you can see this, there's the front end that serves the app. And then when we do a sign-in, so when they put in their account, that whole sign-in process is going to be managed via Supabase. That's really why I like using Supabase. It makes the whole authentication part really easy, beyond just also being a great PostgreSQL database where we can store all of our data. So there's that. And then we also have our backend surface, and that is going to pretty much be the communication layer that handles everything, right? Really the nexus that ties everything together. And then separately, you see the underlying pipeline over here. That's going to be our document ingestion pipeline. So this is something we do locally. Right now, we're not going to do an online upload or syncing mechanism. We're simply going to take all of the files that we already have, and we're going to create an ingestion pipeline. Create the embeddings using OpenAI, chuck it into the vector database, which is in this case going to be a simple PostgreSQL database as part of Supabase, and we're going to use the pgvector extension. And then through that, we enable all the logic in order to serve our application. So that's how this is going to work. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to come over here and let's actually create a todos.md. Because right now we should already conceptually have the map of what it is that we need to do, right? So now let's get clear on a list of action items that we need to work towards. And there's not really any single right or wrong way to start this. We can start with the front end, we can start with the backend, we can start with the database, we have to do the document ingestion pipeline. And I am pretty much open to any kind of structure in here. I don't really have anything in mind right now. But what I'm going to do, as I'm going to talk through this, I'm going to use a speech-to-text tool called Glido. So you might be seeing this pop up. So when I talk over here, you can see this little thing, this dictation bar. This is Glido in action. And you can see when I let go, this is what we can use for talking. Now, I know here in Cursor, for example, you also have the native one, but I don't find it as accurate. And the thing about Glido is that you can use it across any app, any tools, and it understands all of your settings, your user dictionary. So Glido is a software that I am a co-owner in. And if you want to check it out, make sure to check out the link in the description, get.glido.com/Dave. You can get started absolutely for free. No credit card required. I can guarantee it will completely change your workflow. And if you're already using something like Whisperflow, I would still highly recommend to give Glido a try and see if you like it better. We built our application in Rust, so it's very lightweight. It's not this Chromium monster that eats up all of your RAM. And we're also bootstrapped, so we don't care about stealing all your data, and we are very privacy oriented. So let's plan this out, right? So how are we going to go about this? So let me reason through this. So help me set up a checklist here in todos.md. And what is the most logical way to set up this project, right? Do we start with the backend, the front end? What do you want to do? Give me a checklist that I can work towards in order to implement the entire architecture and satisfy the client brief. So there's that. Okay, little bit of a easy way out, right? Normally you would just get to work and start working on this, but for the sake of this tutorial, usually I just keep this in my head. For us, I think it's good to all be on the same page, so we can keep coming back to this. Let's see, here you go, there it goes. So we can keep coming back to this and keep referencing all that needs to be done, right? So also what I'm going to do right now, this is not something you have to do. Let's see, yeah. I am going to create a development branch. So let's switch over to that. So we're now on development, yes. So we keep the main clean. And let's actually see what we got going on over here. Are we still good? Yes. So the Document Copilot implementation checklist. Where do we start? Let's see. Okay. We'll actually start with a database and sample the data. Okay. All good. All the dependencies. Okay, let's go through this together. So for me personally, I got Python installed. Now we need a Supabase project. So in here, if you've never worked with Supabase, there is inside, let's see, where is it? Guides, Supabase setup. There is a setup over here that you can go through. I already pretty much have it up over here. I created a new organization. So you can just go to supabase.com, create a free account. You can sign up with GitHub, Google, whatever. Free account, free organization. And I'm going to create a new project. So what I'm going to call this, let's actually just call this Driftwood Capital. All right. Now we need a database password. So you want to set something strong, ideally, in here. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to do like password gen, just keeping it simple. Give me a strong password or something like this. Okay, that should be fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this in here. So that's good. And let's see, coming back to our project, I'm also immediately going to set up a .env file. And I'm going to say database password. And just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to just show this to you. And like by the time I put this online, I'm just going to nuke the database or change it. But this is the easiest way, so you can just keep following along. Okay, so we got that. You can decide where you want to put this. Like you ideally just want to put this to wherever you're closest to where you live, right? So I'm in Europe, makes sense. Also, important thing, later when we are going to Railway, you also then want to have this in Europe, because when is this going to matter, right? So our application is going to query our database. So if your backend that's going to connect with the database is in Europe, let's say, and our Supabase is in the US, it has to do a big network hop across the ocean, right? So that could add some latency. So always make sure that all of your services are within the same region. If you really want to make this production ready, if you will, then you probably just like want to deploy everything in a private virtual network. But again, that is beyond the scope of this video. Okay, so we keep everything on, and we also enable automatic row level security. Let's put that on. Create the project, and now I am here inside the dashboard, and you can see that right now if we go to our tables, there's nothing here. So empty project, this is the start. Now what I also did is I added the env.example files both for the backend and the front end. So, because this can always be a little bit tricky to configure this. So what we're going to do right now is we're actually both on the backend and front end, we're going to create copies and then we're going to name them .env. So in the previous step, you already saw me essentially creating this with the database password. So let's actually get this out there and actually create a fresh copy. When you go through this, you should already see those in the repository. So there's that. And now look, here's what we are going to need to fill in. So first, if we go over here for the front end, it's pretty simple. We need, first of all, our base URL for the API. We can leave that as is. So I should use this one. And now we need two things from Supabase. So we need our Supabase URL, which you can see. This is going to be your project.supabase.co. So if we come over here, you can see that here you have this code over here. That is your project. You can also see, like, if you go over here, let's see framework, where do you see it? Like, well, it is shown in multiple ways, however you want to connect to your database, but usually the easiest thing to do is just get this from the browser. So let's get that in there and then just like replace this part with your project. And now we need our Supabase anon key. So this is your public key. How this works within Supabase, this is a key to connect with your database, but the important thing is that this is like publicly available. And that's why we really need to be secure with row level security. So only users that are actually logged in can access their own user data. But this is just a way of how Supabase works. If you set it up correctly, it's totally safe. If you don't know what you're doing, which a lot of people are that are just vibe coding this, you have a backdoor in your project. So let's see where we're getting this from. If we go to our project settings, we can go to API. And here you can see your publishable key. So you can also see this key is safe to use in the browser if you have enabled row level security for your tables and configured policies. So remember, that's why we checked enable automatic row level security during the setup. So let's copy that key and plug it in here, right? Okay. Now this project is already set up in such a way that these environment variable files are get ignored. So if I now look over here into my version control, really in my work tree, you can see that the only changes here are this to-do file that we added. So anything we add in here, it's not there. So just something you want to be aware of. Okay, so that's the front end configuration configured. Now let's get to the backend, right? So what we got over there, yeah, I already copied it. Okay, so again, we need the Supabase URL. So we already know this, right? Our Supabase also needs the publishable key. Just make sure I'm using auto-complete over here, but just making sure that that is all correct. Okay, now we need our Supabase service role key. So this is going to be our actual secret key. Now again, I'm just going to show it here so you can see these API keys allow privileged access to your project's API. So this is going to be used in our backend. So we really want to handle this securely because this is also going to allow you to literally like make changes to your database and pretty much read everything. Okay, so coming over here, the service role key, I'm going to plug that in. Again, I'm showing you this here, but before I will upload this video, I'm going to nuke this database. So that's how I'm going to use this. So now we need our database URL. So in here, we need to get this URL. Now there's one thing that we need to be aware of if there are special characters in our database password, because remember, right, I set up a weird password, which was the one, this was the one. You can see there's a special character in here. So I think I may have just actually messed that up and ideally want to set it to this. So I may even just like change that just for the sake of it being a little bit simpler to just encode here in a string. So let me also show you how that works. Let me see actually if I remember where one does that in Supabase. So got project settings, I think it's database, is it database? And then in here, settings, reset database password. Okay, This is like reset, type in strong password. Okay, so now I'm actually going to use the following without that little weird backtick. So I'm going to put in reset password. Okay, since I'm already logged in and authenticated, I can just do this. So now you also know how that works within Supabase. So then what I'm going to do is I need to get my database URL. So how that works is I can click on connect over here, top level, and then I'm going to do direct. I'm going to use session pooler. So the default is direct connection, but I'm going to click session pooler over here. And here's the connection string. Now I'm going to copy that and I'm going to swap this out over here. And I'm going to take my password and I'm going to plug that over here. Okay, so now you can still see the issue over here because this is not parsed correctly. So probably if I just put quotes around that, that should resolve it. Okay. These are always these kind of like little things that can really trip you up. And regardless of how many times you did this, because this is always such a one-time set and forget kind of thing, when something goes wrong, you're always like, okay, what is going on? But you can see if I remove those quotes over here, I think it's because of probably that hashtag and these like percentages over here that will break essentially within the parsing of environment variables. So that's why use the quotes around it. So that makes it safe. So for me, removing the backtick didn't really solve that issue. Okay, now we're going to set up your OpenAI API key. So let's see. Also, for the sake of demonstration and without me having to hide it, I'm also simply just going to use a temporary one. We don't need this right now, but I'm already rather set it up. So we have the whole project set up. So what you can do if you go to our guides and to, where is it? We may even already have it in the README. If you go to platform.openai.com, here you can see your API keys. Let me actually just like remove this one. And then I'm going to create a new API key over here. So this is also something what you can do. And then let me actually call it, what was our company called? Driftwood Capital. This is just for me. So I later remove this. So you cannot use my key. Okay. So now we also have our OpenAI API key. And everything else for now we can leave as is. And then real quick, if you've been following along and getting value from this video so far, would you please do me a favor and hit that like button and also consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Thank you, much appreciated. So that is already quite some plumbing, right? I know if you're going through this, you might be wondering like, hey, this is taking a long time. But yeah, welcome. This is engineering in the real world. You don't just jump straight into like your AI agent and say, build me this. Because then it's going to turn into a mess. Once we have all of this in place, we can now actually start from a good foundation. Okay, so there's that. Let's come back to our docs and to our to-do list. So we got the OpenAI key set up. Let's see. We have the download. We do that, and do we have to download that manifest? Yes, we have that because data downloads, we have it. Cool. Okay. So that's phase 0. That is the setup. And now if I preview this over here, you can see, look, we got these fancy check marks over here. So now the AI recommended, okay, let's just first start with the backend. Usually I would also do this, makes more sense. Like I know it's fun to play with the front end, right? And immediately get something going. But without a backend, a front end is nothing. Empty shell. So we're going to set up our project. So let's take high-level overview of what we're going to do in this phase. We're going to set up the project dependencies, then our config file, set up the FastAPI input, and then we're going to start with our database models. Okay. And then perform the migration. Yeah, this makes total sense to start working on this right now. So first, before I jump into any AI tool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our backend folder. Here we are, backend. And we're going to look at the project that we have over here, the PyProject.toml. So when we're working with UV, what I can do is, first of all, I can do a UV sync. This is going to create the virtual environment that we're going to use, and now we need to add some dependencies to this. Now let's see, in the docs and in the guides and in the backend setup, I showed you what we kind of like need and what we're going to work with. So I'm simply going to, let's see, I'm going to copy this. These are the original dependencies that we're going to work with. So let's set this up. Let's run this. And now here's the beauty of UV. It's going to add all of these dependencies. And remember, in order to avoid getting yanked, we specify exclude newer 7 days. So now we have our project setup, which is great. And then we can add a dev dependency. Let's see, where were we? So yeah, so we can also do, when you do UV add, if you do --dev and just put any other kind of like dependency after that, it will add it to, so we do PyTest and we'll do rough. It will add it to, you can see, dependency group. It will only import those on when you're working locally, right? Not when you deploy this to a server, so you can exclude that. Okay, because right now also what I need to do, because I just added them, they will be here, but now I can do UV sync and I can do --dev, and then it will also import those, right? So let's see. Yeah. Okay, let's clear this up. So now this is our backend setup. Let's come back over here. So we got that, and now this is the point where I am going to start leveraging AI, because now we actually have to, we have to move and we need to create some files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and create a new agent, and I'm just going to use Composer too fast until I feel like it's not really serving us. But what I'm pretty much going to do is I'm going to start very simple, step by step, and we're going to keep checking it. Hey, you're going to help me work on the to-dos. Go to phase 1. We need to set up our app config.py. Can you set up that scaffold? Okay, let's run that. Okay, just checking whether you can still see everything. Okay, so now what I expect is I expect my AI agent to go into our backend folder to create an app folder in here. And in there, we're going to create a config.py that is going to use Pydantic settings in order to load our environment variables. That is what I expect right now. So let's see if this sets everything up correctly. So first it needs to get a little bit, because it's a fresh new session, it needs to get a little bit of an understanding of the code base. There we go. All right. Okay. Expected an app, a config.py, and this is also where it's going to check. Okay, this is looking good. I can already see that my editor is giving some issues over here, and that is likely because I have not specified the, let's see, the, yeah, okay. I need to specify the environment, and this is always one of those things, because normally what you do is your virtual environment lives in the root of the project, right? And then your, in this case, cursor just knows, okay, we're using this environment variable. But right now, since it's not in here, what we need to do is we can either set this up in our configuration or we can enter a path manually. So what I can do right now, if I copy this path and just plug that in here, now let's see, it should have the correct configuration, and it should also resolve those import dependencies, right? So this is one of those things that you just need to get right, and otherwise you get these errors. So let's see what it came up with. Okay, that all looks good. So let's quickly go over what we're doing over here. So we're using Pydantic settings, and with that we can create a settings class from base settings. And this is one of my favorite ways to import environment variables, because in here what you'll see is we can first of all load or link to where the environment file lives. I have to check though, because we're probably going to, because it now says that it has to look in the root, but this is not in the root, so it depends on where we import this from in the next step. So this is just something we need to keep in mind. And then let's see what else it's going to create an origin field here. That all looks good. Yeah, okay, cool. So now it's going to load everything. So now I'm going to continue. Can you now create a main.py file and see if we can actually import this? Because this is always the test, right? To see, okay, can we now, if we set up our main.py, it may already have that. I was looking in the wrong folder. So now you can see if we start to run this, and actually, you know what? I'm also going to uv add -dev ipy kernel. And now before we can actually run that, there's one more thing that we need to add to our PyProject.toml. So I will put it in here. And like working with Python, one of the most annoying things, and I've been working with this language for over 10 years, is managing paths. So the way you set up an entry point for your project to start importing files and to start running everything needs to be very specific. And if you want to go in and you want to run isolated files to run some tests, instead of, for example, running it from the root and then just calling the main.py in order to start up your app, for example, you'll get all kinds of errors. Because what we're doing over here, as you can see right now, we're going to import the app or the settings really that we just created. So if you don't put this to your PyProject.toml, let's see, I can even show it to you. If I just get rid of this and I now want to test this and, for example, just see like if we can import those settings, it will probably say, unless it's still got it into memory or something like that. Of course, now it works, because probably I didn't do the sync. If I do the uv, let's sync this, because now it removed that, and then probably what it will say, I don't understand. Yeah, okay, there we go. Every time I think that I understand it, is like, do you really understand it? But I understand this, okay? So this is now errors because we don't have what I just removed. So let's put that back, the hatchling, and then specifying app as an additional package that we can import. So save that, uv sync, and this is the hard part usually of projects, because when you are following tutorials, everything is very easy, very cookie cutter, but this is where you spend time in the real world. So now let's go through this and let's see if we can import, because look, now we have our settings object. Import settings over here, settings, there we go. So now you can see our app can actually import everything. That was the main goal of this first check, right? So why I like using Pydantic settings is because, let's say we have our Supabase URL, right? Let's say we come over here and we say Supabase URL. Let's say we don't have that. Let's now come back. Let's try and import this again. Look what will happen. We got a validation error. And what? There is a particular required field that is missing, and that is the database URL. So that is just very helpful, especially if we move into deployment, where it can be a lot trickier to manage all of your environment variables. So let's put all of that back. I also noticed that I made an error and actually was putting my credentials for the database into this env.example. So just make sure, if you follow along, always cross-check that, right? So you keep your example clean. That's also in version control. I even see you see, I messed everything up here. So this is always great when you're doing these tutorials and you're talking through things as well. Cool. But anyway, I'm going to nuke the database anyway. So just double check everything. This is still good. This is all placeholder. This should be actually your project ref. Okay. And we're good to go again. Okay, so we got our setup correctly. Now, this is a placeholder, of course, or an entry point really for our FastAPI app. So we got a health check in there, and we can already start running this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up. Can you set up in the backend folder? Can you create a very short README file with instructions on how to manage our FastAPI app? So this is also an exercise that you can go through. We want to document everything in here just so we can not only start working with this kind of like file by file, but also test the whole thing overall, right? So what I can do once this is set up, let's get rid of this, create a new terminal session over here. You can see we can let's go into the backend. And now we can run UV, and we run it, and we via UV-corn, and we do app main app reload. So this is going to be the command to start running everything. And we got a health endpoint. So if I now come over here, there's nothing there. And we can just run this. That will, 2 slashes, status okay. So we got a connection with our app. So that all is great. Of course, there's not much else just yet, but at least we know we have an entry point and we have our config and we can import our settings. So that is great. So let's see what else we now need to do. Just clean this up. Okay, simply going step by step. We got our entry point. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to actually start working on our database. So we're going to, let's see, where are we? We're actually going to create some tables. And one of the easiest ways to do this, which was a big unlock for me, like instead of manually tinkering with SQL code in here, which you really don't want to do, we're going to use SQL Alchemy. That's a Python library that we can use. And with that, we can define our data models within Python and then use that to sync them with the database. And then later, if we want to make adjustments to that, we can even use Alembic to make database migrations, which pretty much means tracking changes and applying changes to your database schema over time. So now this is another excellent point where we can start running things. So let's do things step by step. And let's see, let's open this up over here. Okay, the next step is we're going to create our database models. Can you help me set up the following? Now, again, what do we expect? I now want our model to come in here to app, create a database folder, and I want to have the following tables created. So let's take a look at that. We have some profiles. We have source documents, document chunks, our chats, our messages, and our citations. And we'll have to kind of like see if this is really the ultimate final thing that I want to dive into. I'm not so sure about the message citations, whether we need that. And also see if because the thing is, we of course asked to create this to-do file in the beginning, right? And I'm not so sure what is meant with profile. So we may need a little bit do of a pushback there to see what we're going to do. Okay, there we go. So it now created the database table and we have a base.py in here. So this is going to be the base interface from SQL Alchemy that we're going to use. Now we're going to create the models in here. Yeah, and this is where we're going to map out everything. Okay, so that's starting to look good. Are we already done? Yes. Okay, so let's see. So profiles. Yeah, so I don't really like first of all, can you change profiles to users? Because this is going to be the email optional display name. For me, it just makes sense to use users. Then we have our original source documents. That's going to be okay. Then we're going to have our document chunks. That's okay. Then our chat threads owned by a profile. Then our chat messages. That makes sense. And then, okay, message citations. What is the idea of this? Link assistant messages to chunks with denormalized filing metadata for the UI. I don't understand what this means. So this is also, look, the process, right, of not just blindly accepting everything, but pushing back and then saying, why do we really need this? Okay, it changed this. We're currently going to keep everything, and then once we sync it to the database, we can check it for sure. So let's check it, right? So what's the idea behind the message citation table? Why would we, that was called message citation, why do we need that? So let's put that in there, and just because maybe it was part of the architecture doc that was created at the beginning. So let's do a little bit of a pushback. Okay, so short answer is how the product keeps its trust contract for Tifru. Okay, so what's the idea? It is what does it do? What problem it solves? There are 3 different things in play. We got chat messages, document chunks, message citation. Which passages this answer actually relied on? Yeah. Okay, so it's going to be related to the chat messages. So I think it makes some sense to have a separate table for it. We could also just put it in here, but we can enforce the grounding just a little bit better. Okay, let's keep it for now. So we got that in check, and now we just want to see how everything comes together. And now we're going to create the original Alembic initialization and do the first migration, because right now if I look in here, we still have nothing, right? What we did, if you come in here, you can see, right, we created the models, and that is now all in one file. That is okay for me right now. Normally, you know what, it is actually cleaner. Can you take the database models and split them up into different files so each model has one particular file? That is actually cleaner, because then we can actually click on a chat message and see directly what it is. That's usually how I like to set things up. So let the model rip through that, and then also check about what the next action item is. That is really creating the migrations, and that is where we're going to see things show up in the database. So while we wait for this to rip through it, we can already put in line the next message in here. Just always keeping my context really in check. So we're still, right now, since we're still working on this task, this is still good, but after this I really want to make sure that we reset everything. So so look, now in database we have a models folder. So now you can see let's see, keep the file. Now every database model, which is going to be a table within our database, has a single file, and that is specified over here. So we got what's the table name, what data, what columns do we have in here, and what data type are they. So this is a nice and clean setup. Okay, perfect. Now let's continue setting up the migration. Prepare everything and then tell me when you're ready before making actual changes to the database itself. Keeping the control loop over there. So now what we're going to do, and for those of you that don't know what Alembic is, this is a way to, like I've said, to manage database migration. So we can define our data models here over time, make changes, and everything will be tracked. And then once we perform the migration, it will show up in Supabase. So that will come together in a bit. So let's wait for this to finish. So now you can see it decided to add the Alembic folder over here. It did it outside of the app folder, which, well, it's okay. It doesn't really matter. It depends on how you set it up. Usually I like to have it in the app folder itself. Just keep everything contained, but let's see how it goes. Don't think it mattered that much. Okay, there we go. So what was set up? So here in Alembic, you can see it created the first version of the database migration that we can apply. So if we keep everything, this will pretty much be a single Python file that says everything that it needs to do. So you can see, right? Here are all the SQL queries that we can apply. And then once we make changes later, we simply have more and more files in here. And now what it will do, you can see before you apply, confirm we have your database URL, everything is set up correctly. So now we can actually run this. So let's come in here. And now here you can see we have two options here. We can first do a preview, or we can directly apply it. So since this is just a fresh new project, clean database, for now, I'm totally fine. Let's just run this and first of all, see if everything works. And you can see we got some errors. So where is this coming from? Yeah, okay. This is always a really annoying library within Python, the psycopg2, the one that you see over here. So it could be that we need a binary for that. Where is it? It already have the binary. Okay. Well, instead of just spending time figuring this out, we're going to hit the easy button, and we're going to hit it with a please fix. We're going to hit it with a please fix. We're just going to do that. So what's going on over here? So there is some import error related to this library. So let's see what it does. Yeah, so that's the thing. If you have psycopg without the 2 after it, it uses version 3. And there's a little bit of a difference between how that works. So what do we do? Normalizing database URL to use version 3. Yeah, but okay. Yeah, so what's the fix? This is why we actually should run commits. That is not something I'm doing. So this is actually the part where we should start doing that, because Now you can see, yeah, it normalizes that. Okay. Yeah, okay. So what's going on over here? We use the, where is it? The database URL, right? So here you can see it uses that database URL. And then when we try to connect to it using the URL, we need to rewrite it to the following. So we need to add that psycop.g in there. So we can either add that in the database URL itself, but what the AI decided to do is add a little helper function in here because this is specifically for using SQL Alchemy, which I think is a clean thing to do. I'll use it for now. I'll accept it. And let's see if we now clear this up and we run it again. Look, now the migration seems to work. Okay. So first of all, we are going to make sure we have a commit in here. And let's see, let's put everything in here. Because now, as we start to progress, now we have an actual project, right? Before it was set up, now we have a project. Now we want to keep track of the changes so we can clearly see our diffs when AI starts to mess with some things. But the cool thing is if I now come over here and run this, you should see we have tables. So we have all of our empty tables, our chat messages, document chunk messages, source, users, and also our Alemic version, which is the only table that currently has something in here. Cool. Okay, so this is great. We're moving along. So now if you come over here, let's see. Okay, can you now update the to-do file and check off everything that we did and run the final check, if any? Okay, so now we want to update everything. Let's see. Let's clean this a little bit up. Don't need this. So we're getting ready for phase 2 to set up the authentication. So still a lot of the plumbing, right? It's not as sexy as some of the tutorials that I usually share on my channel where we go straight into hey, here's how you build stuff. But this is how you set up a project. I really can't make it any easier than this for you. Well, the thing is, if you go through this and you have all the code, you can drastically speed this up with AI because I am on purpose going a little bit step by step there, but that is also how you really ensure that everything is according to your best practices and standards, right? Okay, so we have everything set up. One of the important things to understand is that we also have already used the pgvector extension for Postgres to create a vector column. So let's actually validate that over here. So if you use document chunks, let's see, where is it? We have the embedding. Look at this. You can see that embedding, that is a vector. So this is something you can do in Postgres using pgvector, which is very convenient, and we're going to use that later down the line. So there's a lot of, even though we're moving step by step, there's still a lot of stuff that goes on in the background because of that architecture file that we have created. And then quick note, if you're serious about AI engineering and you are watching this video not just to build portfolio projects, but really to make the next move in your career and you want to continue learning beyond what we do here, make sure to check out the links in the description and in the pinned comment below this video. Beyond everything that I share on YouTube, I have 2 flagship programs. One is really all in on the technical side of AI engineering, so not just 4 hours like this, but 60 hours covering everything step by step. And also another program is our freelance program, where we teach developers, data professionals, people with a technical background that currently already have a job, how to start taking on freelance projects with a focus on AI next to their full-time positions and start to make money from that. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to check out the links and our website to learn more. Okay, so we're ready for phase 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new chat. So we reset the context window. And the goal is to set up the authentication full stack. So we're going in the backend, we need to set up our authentication scripts. And in the front end, we first need to set up the scaffold. Okay, yeah, so this is going to be fun. So first, what I'm going to show you is on the front end right now. Let's clean this up. We have an empty project over here. It's pretty empty, right? There's not much there. If we go into the front end, where are we? Front end. Yeah, there we go. And we go into our guides, front end setup. We are going to use PNPM for this, and we can set up a project template. So if I come in here and let's for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to run this. We're going to use pnpm. So make sure right now you have node and pnpm installed. We're going to create a Vite project like in the frontend folder with the template React TypeScript. So we're going to run it, and this is going to set up a whole bunch of files. So it says it's not empty. Yeah, that's correct. So we're just going to say ignore current files and continue. And install with pnpm and start now. Yes. So we also run the installation. It's going to run everything, start the dev server, and boom, we have a setup. We have something running on localhost. This is going to be our template. But why this is so useful? Like, look at what we created. Let's see, where are we? Let's switch sides. There's a whole bunch of stuff. This is also like, I come from like the Python world, right? I'm a backend engineer, worked as a data scientist, AI engineer. Frontend has always been a little bit foreign for me. Now with AI, I can do it, but I am by no means a TypeScript expert. So on this part of the code base, you'll see me like vibe code a little bit more, if you will. But like, look, there's a lot of setup that's required on a project like this. And instead of just like letting AI create everything, let's just use a template so we know we have the proper setup. So it already started everything up. I think with that command, it already ran the install, but I'm going to run it either way. Okay, so this is all good. Now we're also going to add our dependencies. And like I said in the beginning, I want to really minimize dependencies, but there are a couple of things that we are going to use. So we're going to use Supabase. We are going to use Tailwind, and we're going to use shadcn. So Supabase is just, like the database, so we can interact with that. That's great. Tailwind CSS is going to help us with styling, and shadcn is a component library that is going to give us all kinds of cool components out of the box that we can use. And this is going to make the whole process of building cool UIs extremely simple. So again, this is a tip over here. Like this could change the way you build projects forever. So yeah, this is going to be really exciting. So we're going to run those just one by one. We're going to add Supabase. And what this will do, if you go into, where is it, package.json, it will pretty much like install it and add it over here. So you can now see that Supabase should be somewhere in here. Yes, there. And whenever you sync your project and you run pnpm install or it will import all of those node modules similar to what your PyProject.toml will do in your virtual environment. Also, node modules excluded from version control. So you can see in here will probably be something. Yeah, node, you don't want that in version control. Okay, where were we? Coming back to our guides, front-end setup. Okay, so let's get Tailwind in there as well. Let's get Tailwind. And then finally, let's get shadcn in there. Let's get the components in there. Okay, and then we can just hit enter in here, and let's see the component library. We use Redux, and then it asks us which preset we would like to use. So there are different presets to start from. If you want to preview them, you can go to, let's see, let me move me over to the other side. So you can go to ui.shadcn.com/create, and you come into this fancy little editor over here. So look, here you can see all of the different styles, and they're very subtle. Some have like changes in the fonts or the icons that they use. But again, it doesn't really matter as much, and we can always change it later. And then here you can see, okay, look, what do you want? For now, I'm just going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to go with Nova. We'll use Lucid and Geist as the font. Okay, and then we do hit a little bit of an error here, which is expected, because if you follow the default setup, right, that we have in here, so the front-end doc, what we were following, after you install Tailwind CSS, it still needs to be wired up. This is just a little bit of manual plumbing. It's probably an easier way that you can set this up. But in this case, I just like ask AI to set up the right imports, right? So here you can see what was fixed. So we needed to add the Tailwind alias, and also like it's in all of these config files, right? It's over here, config.json, app.json, and the source index. That is, AI is just like, of course, really, really good at that, to just set all of those up. So now you can see, let's see, now we're good. And you can also see that in the component, we have imported the simple button, so that's all working correctly. Now, if this is the first time you're doing all of this, this is super abstract. I know it. So let's actually continue moving so we can actually start putting some of the pieces together. Now, one of the things that I noticed was that we actually skipped one step in the to-dos. So if I open this in preview, you can actually see it. So we still need to wire up our supabase.py, which is essentially going to be our client that we're going to use to connect and interact with our database. So right now that phase 2 that we started with the setup, first I'm going to quickly tackle this. So let's see, let's just copy the path, let's link it to that, and then I'm just going to put this in here. Can you implement our Supabase file right now? Just going to put that in there. Okay, so while we leave that running and tinkering, let's also again zoom out a little bit and talk a little bit about how I'm using AI here right now. See, because there are so many different ways that you can use these AI models. You can use them in the right way, you can use them in the wrong way, but where I see a lot of engineers make the mistake is they just get so lazy, and everything should be this big, gigantic plan. It should be huge, and then you probably don't even read it anymore. And then you say, okay, go build, and you let your agent work for, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour on it. And I think there is a place for that. I also definitely sometimes do that, but especially if you're setting up the beginning of a project and you know what good looks like, staying in the loop like this is often, in my opinion, a way better approach. Because the thing is, if you use these like big chunks, right, you're not going to understand your code base. And I don't care how good AI gets, you still, with every project, you need to have this mental map of, okay, where do things live? How is the project structure? Where do I go? Because otherwise, any addition on top of that, you're going, oh, what is this file? Oh, it changed 3 files, and then, oh, okay, sure. And that's a very slippery slope towards pretty much just vibe coding a code base. And they can work, but you don't really fully understand it. And this way, especially if you use like a faster model, we can also like in a bit just like even switch to GPT, because GPT 5.5 is really good. And then maybe even set that on like the fast mode and set the reasoning very low. That will probably even still be good because we've put in so much work in the beginning, right? So now you can see, let's actually check, did it update let's see, is it done? So now if we go here in the database, we should see we have our supabase.py. So this is going to be our client that we're going to use to connect with our database. So we run everything through that right now. That is using our Supabase add-on key. That all looks good. You can check off phase 1. Okay, perfect. That is now implemented. Let's put that over here. Now let's come back to phase 2. Hey, can you check our current progress into to-dos on phase 2? What do we need to set up? I already set up a scaffold for the front end. Let's get clear on our next steps. Let's just keep it at Composer and continue to run at this, because looking at this from the backend point of view, we just need to set up the authentication, and then in here we have our scaffold. We need to manage environment variables. So that's going to be the next big thing as well. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Okay, yeah, so it recommends to start with the backend. Okay, let's go create the dependencies.py right now. So first going to, in the app, going to create an Auth folder in here and set this up. Okay, there we go. So it created the dependency. So while we're going to take a look at that, let's already instruct the following prompt. So now on the front end, we already did the scaffold, right? So now let's see if we can do this in one chunk. So we have the environment variables, Supabase, HCP, and then let's see. Let's first set up this. And let's say continue with the following. And now let's check what we got going on over here, because now we have the Auth dependencies file in here. Okay, so this is what we're going to use as dependencies for our FastAPI endpoint. So we can interact with the database and pretty much can check whether someone is authenticated. So let's see, coming back over here, we're working through things. So now we're going to work towards the sign-up process. So this is always a little bit tricky because here we also need to interact with Supabase again. And for now, we're just going to use a simple like email-only setup. You can also, with Supabase, you can also do like the login with Google, single sign-on, all of that. But now, let's see. Yeah. Okay, let's continue with the sign-up process and also tell me what I need to do in Supabase in order to continue with this. Okay, let's check this out because right now, this is always where the difference between working on a project locally versus what happens on a deployment can be different, right? Because from Supabase, we're going to have different callback URLs. If we do a sign up, we may need to send an email. And I probably in the beginning just want to avoid email confirmation just to make it really simple to work through things. There we go. Okay, so now it's just like moving through this. Now we need to verify this. So here we're going to spend some time again. So we have the front-end sign up login that's created, which should be protected. Okay. What to do in Supabase. Okay. We need to, so before we can actually test this, let's actually check the following and indeed disable that user authentication. So first we're going to come over here. Let's say we go to authentication. Where are we? Authentication. And then we go to emails and let's see, confirm sign up. That's the email itself. Let's actually see, where do we do this? It's dashboard authentication sign-in providers. This is what I need. Yeah. Okay. And then we turn off this one. And then for now, we're going to disable this. So you can see here are all the various ways that people can set up or log in via an account, right? So a lot of providers out of the box. We'll not go in that. We'll only do email addresses, but since we don't do any email confirmation, this is going to be an internal tool. I'm going to disable allow new users to sign up. Because otherwise, if we deploy this, if we don't put it behind some type of firewall, VPN, whatever, anyone can access it and anyone can create an account on the Driftwood Capital website. So what I'm going to pretty much say right now is, let's say we disable that, and then we need to go into authentication and we need to do the callback URLs. So let's see, that is in URL configuration. And then we need to set up the following. So we set up the following redirect URLs and we store that in here. So that is under authentication, URL config, then here. So now let's actually see, we already did this and we tested that. So now what we can do is see if everything already works. But there's going to be one thing that I'm going to say. Okay, one thing, I disabled new user signups because I don't want to expose this via the front-end application. So how can we create, or what's the easiest way for us to create a user? So the thing is, we can do this actually via, if we go to authentication and then to users, probably the easiest way is for me to right now, let's just do Dave at, let's just call it driftwood.com. Doesn't really matter. The thing is, we're not going to use any email validation. So let's do, I don't know, test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Create the account and then we do auto confirm. So that should now be set up. So this is also a process that you can follow and it should now already automatically be confirmed, right? So this is a whole big world of, okay, how do you do this? How do you send out? How do you let users sign up? But in the beginning, for an internal tool, I always recommend to just disable this and just manually add people. So now we have that in place. It's probably also what was set over here. So now we can, let's see, keep all changes. We're going to open up a new terminal. And first of all, I am going to say, let's first run the backend. We're going in the backend and remember, right? We had our command to run the backend. Let's see, where is it? Just the following. We can make that simpler in a bit. So let's run this. So now we have our backend running, and we're going to create or open up a new terminal. And now we're going to cd into the front end. And then I'm going to run the development server. See if this is already running. See, I'm not sure what beautiful. Look. So let's clean this up a little bit. We can already see some type of scaffold that we have over here. And I created an account, right? So I can do dave@driftwood.com and then do my super strong password. Now this should work, theoretically. Let's see, this calls get me with Supabase. Yes, this verified. Let's actually check. Okay, that looks good. Looks like we got a good configuration over here. So that is always nice. I'm just checking, like this is where like we go pretty fast in here. So it set up a lot of stuff to perform the validation. So now I'm actually just going to say, hey, this is what I got after logging in. Are we good? Very naive, I know, but like the whole thing with like explaining, reading, I don't have time to like read for like 15 minutes to like go and understand this. But ideally, this process you should understand a little bit better to see what we got going on over here. But we got the account, we created this, the backend verified it, and we can even like start to experiment with it. Because if I just do something like, I don't know, like this, enter email at test.com, we'll probably say invalid login credentials. So it seems like we are doing pretty okay here. Yes, phase 2 is done. That's what I thought. Okay, amazing. So you can see we're already bringing a whole bunch of things together. So let's see, let's close this out and come over here. So all of phase 2 is completed. So that brings us to phase number 3. So let's open that in the preview and close this out. Have a little bit of a check to see what we're going to do. So now we're going to create the chat cell, the vertical slice. And this is going to be, first of all, we have our backend setup and then our frontend setup. So let's just first create the endpoint pretty much in our backend that the frontend is going to work towards. And here, instead of directly going to like go implement, what I'm going to do over here is we're going to, here I first just want to see what it's going to do, because this is going to be, we're going to take bigger jumps. Can you look at a to-do list, phase 3? We're going to implement the backend part that I listed here below. Can you first create a plan to show me what this looks like? So I'm going to start that, and then I'm also going to do exactly the same for the front end, and I'm going to plan that. Can you look at our to-do list and check the front end tasks that we need to work on for phase 3, and can you create a plan for this to show me how we're going to implement this? Okay, so we're going to run that side by side and wait for those plans to complete. Okay, there we go. We got the backend plan. So let's have a look at this. Okay, phase 3 backend. We're going to do the chat cell. Stop means we're just going to create the boilerplate, the starting point, really, without implementing the actual logic in there. And let's see what's already done. This is going to be the architecture. So yeah, get current user, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the API surface, we're going to, it's the whole thing that we're going to do, right? So we're going to, users can have chats. So in the database, a user can create a new chat, which has a thread ID. And then underneath that, we're going to store messages. So if we come back to our original database design, that's how it's set up, right? So we now have a user's probably not in there. That's something I created. I created an user within Supabase for our authentication, but that is not the same as creating a user here in the table. So that's something that we need to set up, and then chats and messages are connected. So that's what we're going to set up right now. So let's see what this is all going to look like. Key decisions. Yeah, and the reason why it's getting all of this like pretty good out of the box is because, of course, we have this whole architecture MD that is constantly referring to, right? So that's always something to keep in mind. This is definitely going to be a big chunk where we need to do some reviewing over here. But for now, again, I'm just going to switch over to building mode and let it work on this. And before that, I'm actually also just going to commit a checkpoint over here. And then going to the front end, we can now look at that plan to work on that in parallel. So that is just pretty much setting up the scaffold here of the implementation and creating the layout. And with the front end, I'm always a little bit more forgiving when it comes to like vibe coding, because pretty much from the front end, once the foundation and the authentication is set up correctly, it's just like, look, if it looks good visually and it works, good to go. That's also probably because I'm mostly a backend engineer and that the whole world is a little bit more foreign to me. But for this, I'm just going to hit build over here and go through this. So now the backend is starting to work on things. And now this is the moment really where we're going to accelerate, because now you can also see like this is a lot. If you see all of this, if you have to like manually review all of this, it's going to be a lot, right? It's going to be a lot. So coming back to our architecture, just zoom out. Where's our doc? Yes. So we set up our Supabase, and now we're working really on the communication between, okay, how can our front-end application communicate with our backend, with our API, while handling the authentication via Supabase, and of course retrieving the messages. So that is really where we're going to configure, because like, look, this is too much to like manually go through right now. So with this project, it's like, this is also the first time that I'm doing an actual live build really like this. So for me, it's also finding the balance between making this still enjoyable to watch, right? And not me just like reviewing code for an hour. So let's just see how things go in here, because the backend already went through it, and now the frontend is also done. So you can see it like cranked out a lot. So here we're moving fast. So one other additional thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to like, first of all, like, and I'm also like, I'm not giving these commits any meaningful messages right now, just because we're working towards the first version. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up dedicated terminals right now. So I'm going to open up this folder, and I want pretty much one in the backend. So you can see over here. So this is going to be a terminal in the backend, and then I'm going to create one in, let's actually do that over here. Open up terminal here. Going to do that in the front end, because from now on we gonna be looking at these terminals a little bit more often. So in the backend, so let's see, we're already in the backend, and let's just run the API over here. And let's see, pnpm dev. We don't we don't need the, so okay, here we go. So now we can have a little bit more space really within cursor over here and not look at the tiny terminal. So the tasks completed, plans implemented. Now let's come over to our front-end application and see what so this is the sign up on the sign in. So again, we do Dave at Driftwood. We do our sign in. Okay, look, this is what it created. So we're already starting to get a little bit of a feel for what this could look like. It's still a little bit ugly. Not much is happening here. We can sign out. We can start a conversation. But this is, we can at least log in right now, and we have the scaffold. So that's great. So now let's clean things up over here and come back to our to-do. Phase 2, okay. Okay, can you now update our to-do MD file? Also check the backend and the front end. Where are we at right now? Okay, phase number 4 coming up. That is going to be an interesting one, because that's mostly going to be the separate part underneath over here that we're going to work on. Once we have this scaffold, we're already in a pretty pretty good spot. And as you can see, phase 3 is now done. And that's also because I let the AI, of course, create the entire plan for both of those phases. So on the back end, we have set up, let's have a look at what we did, right? We have our app, we have our API, we have our endpoints. So we have chat, we have auth. And on the front end, we have created everything from like the login to the chat list, also the API endpoint to work with the AI SDK from Vercel. And we have set up the basic chat. So things are coming together. But now we're going to take a step kind of like in a little bit of a different direction and start working on the ingestion pipeline. So here, remember, right, we have to work with the HTML files that we downloaded. So these files. And if you open these, you can see there is a whole bunch of HTML crap pretty much that we don't want in here. So all of these XML tags. So we need to parse those. So what I pretty much have in mind is first I want to take these original downloads and I want to turn them into Markdown. And I'm going to create a separate folder for that. I think that's the right way to do it. So we have the original, we have the downloads. Let's actually put it in here, one level higher, so not in downloads. And we're going to model the exact format over here, but now we want Markdown. And I want to use a particular library for that, and that is a docling library. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uv add. This is going to be a dev dependency because we're going to run it locally, and I'm going to run uv add dev docling. And that is because I'm not in the backend, it should be here. So now we're adding docling as a dev dependency. So what docling is? Docling converts messy documents into structured data and simplifies downstream document and AI processing by detecting tables, formulas, all of that. So that pretty much sounds like something we need, right? So I know this also because I did an entire project on docling. So if you go over to my, let's see, AI cookbook, and I go into knowledge, there's an entire setup on how to work with docling. So I may even reference that, but let's just see, because the library may have changed a little bit. So where are the docs? Docs are over here. So now first what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to start working on this. So let's keep the to-dos open. So where are the docs? Let's keep the to-dos open. So we need to do an ingest normalized chunk. Yeah, that's what we're going to start with. Okay. I am going to come in here and I'm going to first link the docling docs. And let's see. Here's what we're going to do. Can you go through our downloads folder and take all of the HTML files and convert them to Markdown using docling? I already installed it as a dev dependency. You can reference the official documentation below. And I want you to export them to the Markdown folder, which is in the data folder. And I want you to use the exact same folder structure with the years and the manifest, but now in Markdown. So we make them accessible for later processing. Okay, that's the prompt. So now the only thing that I did not mention is where to add that script in order to do it. So actually I'm just going to stop it one more time and adjust it. Can you create the script in order to run this and add that to the data folder itself? So don't make this part of the backend code because this is separate. Put it in the data folder as a separate file. I think this is how I want to do it. It doesn't really matter as much, but I think it's just clean because, again, this is going to be isolated and only something we run locally right now. So we're not going to do an online generation process. And with that, it's always just best practice. Anything that's not required for your deployment, like keep it out of your application folder because it's code essentially that your app doesn't rely on. So that's why we can do it. The only thing is the pipe project that Tommel is here. So let's see how it's going to handle that. So it's going to create the convert. So in the data folder, convert to Markdown. Let's just keep an eye on it. So it's going to convert to Markdown, all of that. Yeah, looking good. And docling has a very simple interface. So if you you can see, so you can, from Docling, we implement the document converter, which is the class that holds all the functionality. And then here you can see it sets up the paths correctly to make sure we know, look, here is where the files are. This is where we need to put it to. And then it creates one simple function and it's going to run it over here. So let's briefly, so this is probably running in the background right now. This can take a little while. By the way, this is all open source. This is all free. It just uses your compute, but it does use some, it does use some models which are can be a little bit expensive. So if you run this and your laptop's fans start to run, you know where it's coming from. Nothing's wrong. It's just a process. So here you can see, okay, how does it work? So first we start with the manifest because that essentially links to all of the files. So we load that, we create the folders if they don't exist already. This is where we set up the converter. And then we have the manifest, we load that in, and then we're going to run for everything. So you can see for the filing in filings, just going to loop over all of the documents in here. We're going to, let's see, get the path, and let's see where the actual magic happens. This is where the magic happens. Result is converter.convert HTML path. And then we're going to write that back to Markdown. Like this is it. This is the logic. Everything else around it is just managing paths and imports. And this is where, look, there we go. This is already always cool to see. So that converter, you can see that is set to the document converter. So that's why we are able to run this. Let's see, done. Okay, so okay, I think we're already through it. So let's now actually open up a preview and see what we're working with. So now you can see we have a markdown file. You see all clear with tables in here. So let's actually see whether we did a great job at that, because yeah, okay, so that's starting to look good. So this is really great about Docling, is it can recognize these tables. And now there are lots of ways that you can process data and put it into a structured format, right? So there are various paid resources, like all the big cloud providers, they also have tools for this, but I found Docling to be really good. And I think especially for documents like this, I'm just going to scroll through it to see, like, look, and this is going to be the most important part, right? All of these tables. Do we get the tables correctly? You can see, so they're big tables here. So that all looks good, but then this is something that we may need to keep a check on. Like here, like, is this empty? I'm not sure. Are we missing information over there? So the funny thing is, like, also on this right now, it's a simple short step within the whole pipeline. But in the real world, it could very well be that this whole ingestion process of taking the raw data and turning it into Markdown could very well be the step where you spend the most time. Because as you imagine, right, if you get something wrong here, then downstream information is going to contain those errors. So I just really want you to be aware of that, constantly kind of like striking the balance between me, like moving forward, showing you the best practices. But if this were a paid project, I would spend some time, probably if like a day or two, to really dial this in and see and experiment with different methods to see if we really get everything correctly. So we may come back to this later if we notice an error. Like usually like the plain text, that all works. But the tables, like having, and you can imagine, like having this column, for example, just like one to the side can mess up all of the information. Cool, so now we have all of that. So we can now put this into our database if we want to, or immediately go to the chunking. Let's actually see if the source documents. Let's see. Did it already put something in here? No, that's still empty, right? Yeah, that's good. Okay. Yeah. So now, okay. So we exported all of the documents. Can you now put this into the database? So it's in our source documents. And you know what? Actually, one thing that I now think of, what we can do is we can use a parallel kind of like agent in the background, and we can say, I just converted all of our HTML files that are in downloads to Markdown using Docling. you are a document reviewer, and can you audit whether all of the information is correctly? Now, you can never check everything because these are long reports, but I want you to specifically pay attention to some of the tables and do a quick sanity check to see if Docling was able to correctly convert the tables. I want you to do some quick random checks, and if you run into any error, let me know. Now, that could be a little side quest that we use another agent for. And as you can see, I use GPT High. So this is okay. We use a beefier model. This can easily run for a couple of minutes. So let's see if we get anything back. Hopefully not, because I don't really want to spend a lot of time fixing that, but at least we know, right? At least we know. Okay, let's see. We're now going to ingest it. So let's see, where are we? We have load source documents. What did we create? We created an app in our backend. We created an ingest folder, and this is going to load the source documents. So it's going to take our markdown files. We have our company names, and it should put everything into the database. Now, since this is a one-time manual batch upload, we don't need this in our Alembic migrations, and I actually prefer a simple script like this. So this is, again, something we can just run from here. So let's see, we have our database with source documents, nothing in there. And we do UV run, and we run it as a Python module. Okay, let's do it. I'm not sure if we need that. Okay, skipping existing. Why is it existing? Let's see. Oh, wait, there we go. So now we should have 25. Yeah, we can check. You see 25 records, 5 times 5, 5 years, 5 companies. And it's beautifully put everything in here. So we got the ticker, we got the the number in here, company name, we got which form is his filing date, and let's see, we got the source URL. And now we have one beautiful text field in here, which just contains the whole markdown file. Okay, so this is good. All right, let's now come back to our progress, because now next what we're going to do is we pretty much did the beginning. Now what we need to do is we need to take our documents, where are they? And we're going to create document chunks around this. So I'm not going to go super deep into how you set up RAG pipelines and how all of that works conceptually and theoretically, because I have a whole bunch of other videos that do this. So I'm just going to do the process, right? So again, if with any of these techniques, if you're like, what the fuck's going on? Like, you can reference some of my other videos where I go like one entire video just on that topic. But the main idea is that we're going to split them up into chunks so that we can later use them for retrieval, so that not every time a user asks a question about the specific document, it has to go through all of the entire documents. That's the first goal, really, and we're going to use embeddings for this. So there's going to be a lot that's going to happen behind the scenes here. Docling is also going to use us in here because we are going to use the hierarchical chunker. So the hybrid chunker, hierarchical chunker, we're going to use that to respect the documents. Now, also our analyst came back and it pretty much said, look, the information is factually correct, but there are some duplicate columns and some tables are a little bit weird formatted. For me, that's okay for now. I don't want to spend more time on that. But it pretty much said, look, if that information is going to be analyzed by an LLM, will it still be faithful? And mostly for like a RAG pipeline, it will still be okay. But just know that we may, in the real world, need to spend some more time there. So now I'm going to we're going to create a plan over here. And pretty much we're going to take phase 4 and we're going to continue. And I'm going to say, okay, can we now continue with phase 4 and set up the ingestion pipeline to create the vector embeddings and input the document chunks? So what we need to do here is we need to use our local markdown files, and from Docling, we're going to use the hybrid chunker and the hierarchical chunker in order to set things up. So I want you to look into the to the documentation from Docling and figure out the right way to set this up. And then given our embedding model that we're going to use, make sure you respect that length as well and set up the whole script to chunk it, then create the vector embeddings and then put it into Supabase, into the right table as well. Don't run anything just yet, but first just create a plan on how we need to set everything up and what are the different steps before we can actually run everything. Also, when we do the embeddings, this is a expensive process. So we first want to test it with one chunk, upload it to the database. So we make sure everything works before running everything. Okay, so that's then a prompt that I would give to start planning out this section over here. Okay, and now it's going, cursor is coming back with some questions for me. So this is good to implement because when we're working with Docling, first, once it kind of like reads it in, we exported it to Markdown. But under the hood, it works better if we have it in a Docling document, which is the temporary file before it exports to Markdown. So what we can do, what we can say right now is let's just indeed take the HTML files again, create Docling files from that. So we preserve the page numbers, etc., and then turn them into turn them into the chunks. So that is okay. We'll leave that. Okay, so now it came back with the plan. So let's go through this. So we have the documents. Yes, database is ready. Key decisions. We're going to use the hybrid chunker because it already includes that. Yes. Okay. Model input. That all looks good. Where are we going to put this? We're going to put it in the ingest folder outside of the app. That also makes total sense. Let's see. Ingest. Embeddings.py. Probably better to okay, let's see where it puts that. We may need to move things around a little bit, but let's just first start building this. Now, this is going to be quite the pipeline that's going to be put together. All right, so the agent is making good progress. So here you can see all of the to-dos that it has checked off. So we first have a chunking strategy over here. We have a simple file to create our embeddings. And we have the file that pretty much brings it together. So if we look at the plan, it first set everything up and then it quickly did a test with a single file and a single chunk in order to see if everything works. And we've now continued with doing pretty much everything. So that's going to take a little bit. So also keep in mind that when you're using your OpenAI API key, this is going to incur some costs. It's not going to be much. I can maybe check in a bit to see what kind of the usage really is on this. Let me actually see if I can pull up the usage data for you. I'm not sure how long it takes for this to kind of update. Seems to be a little bit of a lag because it says 11 cents spent right now. I don't see much yet, but we do have all of our documents in here. So if you now check, we got our chunks. So this is what we want to see, right? We have a document ID, we have an index, page number section, then we have the text in there, then we have the actual vector embedding. So this is the vector that you can see over here. Token count, and let's see, the search vector that we're later going to use, and the text. Now I can already see over here that I don't really like this. So there is table data in here, but it has very little context. So I can already tell for pure semantic search, this is not going to be that good. So optimizing that whole process of how you get your chunks in the database, again, it's one of those things where you can spend an entire week, an entire month sometimes per project. So we just have to kind of bear with that for now and set up the whole pipeline, and later also potentially just explore some agentic search over the Markdown files. But at least the pipeline works, right? So we got the vector embeddings in here. What's nice about the hierarchical chunker that we can use from, let's actually see if this, how this is explained, because the thing is it considers headers within a document. So instead of doing a very naive split on saying, I'm just going to split every, 500 tokens. It does the following. It uses a hybrid approach. So it applies tokenization-aware refinements on top of the document-based hierarchical chunking. So That's why this is a good solution out of the box. It's way better than just naive chunking, but with tables like this, it can still get a little bit messy. Okay, let's come back to our process and see what we have done. Okay, so I think we can actually check off phase 4 and start actually building a retrieval pipeline. So let's quickly, can you do a quick check in our to-dos and see if we have checked off or can check off all of the boxes in phase 4? And if so, please do, because I think we have everything going, which brings us to step number 5. So this is where we're actually going to start building the retrieval pipeline and create everything. So let's see, what do we have in here? We do a reciprocal rank fusion. Yeah, okay. And we're going to set all of this up. Yeah, okay. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to actually link to a previous project that I did from hybrid retrieval. Now, this is not the exact same implementation because we're going to use pgvector in here and Postgres full text search instead of BM25, but I want to kind of like model it off this. This is it's a public repository. So now what I'm going to do is I am first, let's see, are we completed? Yes, completed. Okay, so now reset context, go back to Composer 2.5 fast, and I'm going to link this in, and let's tag the to-dos and do the following. Can you check out our to-dos and then read phase 5 and understand what we need to do here? We need to set up the retrieval pipeline. Below, I will link a repository where I've implemented hybrid search before. Now, this is a little bit of a different situation because we use Postgres, we use pgvector, and we're going to use Postgres full text search and not BM25. But I want you to model the patterns that you see in that hybrid search repository, and specifically also how we use Pydantic AI in order to bring everything together. With that in mind, can you create the plan to implement phase 5 retrieval? All right, so that's then, oh, wait. That's the, let's stop. We need a plan. We need a plan first. So that's how I would set that up and start working with that. And while we're on this and kind of like going through this, I have used and still use like a lot of the tools like Claude Code, Codex, Cursor. Right now, if you ask me about kind of like my favorite setup to do like really complex, heavy work, I would say right now Codex with GPT 5.5. For like familiar projects like this, Cursor and the planning feature in Cursor, and also like using some of the fast models, this is the way I am most productive, meaning I like move the quickest. These like bigger models with like high reasoning and these agent harnesses, usually it just like takes a long time for them to like create the plans. They're very thorough, but you end up waiting a lot. And with that, usually what you do is you start to kind of like work on a lot of stuff simultaneously, but then you cannot like fully keep track of everything anymore. So like this is also for me like the sweet spot between moving quickly. These are already like really big chunks, but since I'm referencing familiar stuff and using an architecture that I've kind of like designed beforehand, and this is currently all dummy data, I'm okay with moving fast because there's not much to mess up, right? If we delete the entire database, like I don't care, I just created it. We just re-enable it, right? Okay, so here we get a question. So the hybrid retrieval cookbook adds co here as a cross encoder after re-ranker. True. Do we want that? Let's keep it simple for now and only do this. Continue. We can later potentially add another re-ranker in there. But for now, I want to keep things simple because otherwise you also would need to get an additional API key. So this is easier. Okay. So now we got the plan and okay. So now cookbook, yeah. Module layout. This is important. We're going to create, the retriever, okay. All looks good. Small modules, retrieval models. Yeah, so okay. This is going to use Pydantic models. Okay, looks good. Query embedding, yeah, we need that. SQL queries, okay, this is for the full text search, probably, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's easy. Okay, looks good. And like, don't get me wrong, this is this is a lot what we're doing over here. But since I'm referencing the this hybrid retrieval, which is a tutorial I did like 3 weeks ago, I kind of like know what good looks like, and I'm okay to pretty much the only thing that was really interesting that's going to be different is in this tutorial I used BM25, which is when you implement hybrid retrieval and you essentially you implement retrieval via vector embeddings and then also via text search, keyword-based search. BM25 is just a nice algorithm, a really good algorithm to do that. Postgres out of the box doesn't really have a native implementation for that, but it does have a full text search. It's a little bit different, but it can still search and match keywords. So that's what it explained over here. So we're going to do semantic search. And then here's what the SQL query for that looks like. And building on top of this, and this is going to replace the BM25. So this is pretty much how we query that. So now this is going to, let's see, it's going to work on that. This is going to take some time. And now probably if we're going to retrieval, yeah, this is where we're going to see our retrieval module come up. So let's give this, oh, it's already done. So like, look, this is super cool. So now okay, let's see, how do we actually test this? We keep all, because this is the part where we really need to make sure that everything works correctly. So let's see. Okay, perfect. This is already checked off. So while we are going at this, context is still reasonably okay. I'm going to summarize this just for now, because these really go hand in hand. So I'm okay with continuing in the next thread. And then let's see, this is the grounding part. So ground answers, yeah. This is where we actually go. This is all still backend stuff. Is that correct? Just checking. Then next we're going to so this is summarized. Okay, can you continue from what we just implemented in phase 5? While I'm going to test and experiment with that, can you create a plan to implement phase 6? And then we'll put that into plan mode. And okay, so what have we created? It created a smoke retrieval in scripts. Okay, let's actually see what this looks like. Let's see this while this keeps on running. So what do we have? We have a couple of queries. We keep all the changes and we have the retriever. Okay, so this is where, let's get rid of this, where the interactive session is going to be useful again. So let's see if we have all the imports correctly. Okay, so we're going to check. Let's say a user would ask the following. So this is the first question that we had in our example questions, right? About Apple's 10Ks, about the revenue mix. And we have the search filter. So we put a particular filter on the Apple documents and then a particular form. And then we have our document retriever. And then let's see, this is just going to check what it already implemented. We have the search and then the form. Okay, so this is, I think there's nothing, this is just retrieval. So there's no LLM hit just yet to, where are we? To actually synthesize the answer. This is just checking, okay, what do we get back? What do we get back from the model? So let's actually take this. So we have our retriever, which is implemented in retriever.py. Here you can see all of the filters, top K. So this is, I believe, it out of the box created the hybrid retriever, because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here. Already, does it import? Does it use? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it uses Fusion already. So this is the full thing. Okay. So now for query, filters in here, we're going to retrieve everything. So let's just first see if that works at all. There we go. Okay, so we're retrieving the documents. Okay, so this is always the point where, let's see if we scroll up. We really need to check and validate whether this actually makes sense. And those tables, they don't really help a lot here because it's really hard to look at this. So one technique that I already have in mind that would really greatly benefit this whole pipeline is creating a little bit of a summary to every chunk, so it has a little bit of context. So that's probably something we can do later, but at least the search works. So now what this does, and again, if you've never built a RAG pipeline, this is way too abstract, and you need to go back to one of my earlier tutorials in order to better understand this. But what right now, what I'm interested in is just, does the pipeline work? Can we actually get documents back? I'm not as much interested in the quality just yet, because I know that's an optimization game that we need to play later. So for now, just getting all of these results back, we filter for top case 5, and then down in here, since we have a hybrid retrieval pattern, we first get way more results, and then we actually boil it down. So what I now also want to do is in here, let's see, what is this? This seems like it did not create the actual, oh, here it is. Here is the actual plan. Yeah. What I also want to do is in the retrieval folder, can you create a quick README file where you explain all of the default settings and how the pipeline works, also with a mermaid diagram in there? Just to give you a little bit of a visual representation about what this does here. I saw it in the plan, what kind of like setups it did for both the text-based search and the vector embeddings, and how it brings together, and then how it selects top K. So I want to bring that together for you. Now, if we go to step number 5, this is where we're going to add the LLM agent. So now we're going to actually create something where we take the user input, we take the retrieved documents, and we're going to give an answer. It gives a summary of what was created. Here's the patterns, and yeah. Okay, this is a lot of work that's going to be done here. This is a lot of work. But again, since I know we're going to use Pydantic, and I'm referencing the other repo where I already set something up like this, this should all be good. When we tie it into like the orchestrator, that's already where we prepare it to be an entry point for the front end. So let's go and start working on this while we wait for this to come together. So let's see, this is done. Now we also have that README file. So let's see, just trying to figure out, yeah, this is part 6, where it now starts to work on this plan. Now let's open the preview. So while the agent is working on phase number 6, we can dive into our retrieval pipeline, right? So hybrid search over the SEC filings, chunks stored in Supabase. So every query runs semantic search, like using pgvector, and keyword full text search. In parallel, it fuses the ranked list with reciprocal rank fusion, and then hydrates the top hits with document metadata and optional neighboring chunks for context. So here's a visual representation of how we currently have it. So on the full text search, we probably need to make this a little bit more clever, because usually out of the box, what this will do is it will take the whole user query, and that just doesn't really work well. We probably first need to just extract actual keywords from that before we run that, because this is way too naive. And then this is like just a normal RAG pipeline. We embed the query, OpenAI, we get all of the top candidates, and then reciprocal rank fusion, top 5, good. Okay, yeah, and then this is what I wanted to check. So we have the default settings. These are all retrieval tuning lives in config. Okay, so that's good. So it decided to add everything here. So here you can see. So here you can also see that it's now working on this. So this is the step that we do over here, but this is not what I want. I actually want GPT 5.5 in there. Text embedding 3 small is correct. So here you can see it's really making our config bigger by explicitly stating, okay, what do we want in here? And then this is interesting to optimize the retrieval pipeline. So let's just see what we have. Retrieval top K, RFF 60. Okay, looking good. And again, there's no perfect set of numbers out of the box where I say, yeah, you always have to use this. This greatly, I get these questions a lot. Like, this so much depends on your data set, on your chunking strategy, on pretty much all of the components that involve your projects. But this is a good setup to begin with. Optimization, we can take care of that later. Okay, so it already ripped through things, and now we can already test some stuff. So let's see. What did it create? It created the smoke. I always find it funny when it calls it like smoke tests. That's like the most AI thing to do right now. I would just call it, I don't know, run assistant or something like that. But anyway, now you can see in the smoke retrieval, we just run the user queries and we would get the documents back. Here, we actually bring everything together. We have the following queries and we run the whole pipeline end to end. So we're also going to synthesize an answer using the language model. So even now checking, we can run the test over here, run the live. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we'll get back to the front end later. First, just I want to see what this looks like and whether this actually runs. Query, just want to see how it's. Can you simplify the smoke assistance.py file and instead of it being a CLI command, just give parameters in the main function that I run that I can manually change in the file and then run the Python file without parameters? So this is very much an AI thing to do, right? It adds arguments so that I can then come in and run it here manually. But AI is really good at this because it just plugs in the parameters for you, but I can't be bothered with trying to understand it. I just want to see it in the Python file. You can see, and so now it has all of these queries. Can you give me some controls over which query? I want to run one query at a time. So extend the main function so I can do that. Just want to simplify it a little bit because this is going to loop over all of those queries and then it's very hard to test it, right? So let's see, keep file. Where is it? Well, let's see. Where? Okay, so now, okay. This is not, I don't like this. Can you simplify it even more? Let's just maybe create the user queries. Let's just create a dictionary and then below, I just want one function where I can plug in a dictionary key and then that is the question. Just make it simple, as short as possible. This is just for me to run everything. This is again is way too much, and you have all of these numbers in here. I just want to simplify things. Look, it just gets rid of a whole bunch of code. Query key, what? Okay. Okay, still not really what I had in mind, but I'll take it. So now you see it created this dictionary, and it now Apple Mix is the default query. So we start with that, and then if we run this, you can see. This is now going to process everything. Let's see what we got. We got a whole bunch of errors, missing credentials. We do have our OpenAI API key, right? Just checking. Yeah. When you run the file directly, it doesn't have the API key. Can you make sure we import the settings and make sure everything is correctly set up? Because we don't have the API key in here because it doesn't import our config file. So this is something it just needs to load. So it needs to adjust that. So pretty much what we need to do, and let's see, let's get rid of this. I don't like this. Just import the settings. By importing these settings, you can see it will load all of the environment variables. So I believe if we set this up, let's just get rid of this. Does this all work? Yeah. So now we get our main function. And then in here, let's run our Apple Mix. Okay, this is expected because we're running it in a Jupyter process. So I can do two things. I can from nest async. Let's see, nest asyncio. No, it's import nest asyncio, and then let's see, it's nest asyncio.apply, and then if we do it like this, now depending on which Python version we're in, let's see if this works. This should work. Yeah, there we go. This is just something you need when you are using this interactive session, so we can have a look at what's happening over here. And when you run any asynchronous functions, which Pydantic AI relies on under the hood. So let's actually see model. We get the query. Let's actually see. This is taking long. So this means it's either stuck in a loop. Let's see, because it may need to do a little bit of extra printing here. So it does model query and then the answer. Okay, so now we need to check, is it actually stuck or is it actually taking that long? Shouldn't take that long. I think this is already something going wrong. Okay, and the good thing was that it was not stuck, but it just took some time, especially on the last part. So here in the file, I want to do a couple of things. So first of all, I want to add a little bit of logging so we actually see this. And then also I want to better understand how we set up the pipeline right now and also check if we can run some things async. So that's pretty much what I should have said to the AI. Okay, can you make sure we add some logging to the smoke assistance file? So also when we use Jupyter, we can actually see what's going on. And are there optimizations where we can run some more checks in parallel? So doing sequential LLM API calls, parallel instead of sequential. And then also, can you create one document, a README file, put it into one of the modules where it makes most sense to describe how the retrieval pipeline now works and especially how the grounding works? Because the thing is, it already went a little bit too far in my opinion, and that's also because we're moving so fast, I cannot read everything. It went a little bit too far on the validator, on the grounding already, because it was a little bit kind of overfitted on this concept of the client brief that every answer must really be validated, right? So instead of just doing the normal retrieval pipeline, we also, after we get everything, we also take the answer and then we fact check it again on, I believe, on the chunks that are in the database. So that's what's going on over here. So I just want to get a quick document to see if that makes sense. I mean, it's a good setup, but it could very well be that the whole implementation is just a little bit funky. Also, I want to do one more check. When we look at the full text search from the user query against the PostgreSQL database right now, the keywords that we put in there, do we now just put in the whole user query or is there some processing on top of that? Because the thing is, if you do a full user query, there will almost never be a match, right? Can you tell me how that works? And then also give me some examples that you actually test against the database to see if the current implementation actually makes sense or whether we first need to do some keyword extraction. Okay, so then that's the prompt that would be going through my mind when I think about that. Okay, so what's running this? Okay, so now we have the progress over here. Let's see what we have. We now have timestamped logs in there, which is good. We have the agent start and then the tools. So which tools did it? Let's see. We can see all of the tools that it is using. So we do search filings, reach chunks. Okay. I think it already implemented way more than I wanted at this point. So it's already using a lot of these tools. So it actually created a search agent. Let's actually see. Okay, and this is why you need to be so careful with AI, right? Because that phase number 6, that was definitely way too big. So let's see in the instructions. Let's see, your Document Copilot, product contract, yes. Corpus tool usage. So here's actually what it's doing. So use the analysis questions. Yeah. Read the chunks. Okay. Read the surrounding chunks only. Okay. So this is actually good. So it can expand a little bit and minimize. Okay. So this is actually already quite sophisticated. But again, I'm now just trying to figure out what it already did. Okay, so this is also fun. So here, look, this is the whole pipeline that was implemented already. So the end-to-end flow. We got the question, then we create the agent, and it does the search listing, document retriever, embed, semantic search for full text. Okay, then we get the chunks plus neighbors. Yeah, okay. So and it grounds the answer back. I mean, this is quite sophisticated. In order to fully understand this, I probably have to spend at least half an hour or so to check this out. But the thing is, right now there is no real need for optimizing any of this before we can actually play with this in the front end. So also to keep the momentum going, I want to keep moving a little bit fast over here. And then let's see over here, that was the text query. to see how that is implemented. So yes, yeah, that is what we need. Yeah, that's what I thought. So can you implement a step to, based on the user query, extract like 3 to 5 terms that actually make sense for a keyword-based search? Can you implement this into our pipeline? And I'm going to plan for that. Like, the good thing is, like, with all of this, we're moving with a lot of on a lot of different things right now. Like, the full entire code base is going to be available for you, right? So you can always back check everything and kind of like begin with the end in mind and then reverse engineer. So let's work on this and come back to our to-dos, because I want to start moving things together in the front end. What about you? So, okay, trust UI citations. Okay, cool. Let's see. Like, now that we're moving so fast, like it probably also wired up a whole bunch of like this is all backend. Like, I'm wondering what it already did on the front end though. Okay, that's pilot readiness. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to open up a new one. We're going over here. Can you check our to-do list and continue with phase 7 and create a plan for that? I want to wire everything up into the front-end application so that we can actually start experimenting with this. And one important thing, since we have quite a sophisticated pipeline already, whenever the user asks a question, I also kind of like want to see status updates for when the user is waiting so it understands what's going on. Okay, let's plan for that. And then how should we pick the 3 keywords from that? Let's see, this should be an LLM call. Yes, that we should do that. Okay, let's clean things up a little bit. Do we already see something over here? Yeah, now we can see some spent. So look, now you can see that we're actually spending some money over here. So this is good. So you keep an eye on this as you start developing with this. So let's come over to the front end application and see, this is still not wired up. That is really what we're going to do right now. So one thing that when you're working on the front end, the models from Anthropic, the Claude models, are generally way better at that. So I don't expect this to be really great out of the box when we start working on this. So I may do an additional kind of like layering with a Claude model in order to make it just a little bit fancier. Okay, let's see. Full text search plan. That is pretty much user query, parallel prep. Yeah, that's what I want in there. That's exactly what I was missing. So when I looked at the retrieval pipeline, right, this is already what I said, where we go straight from user query to full text search. And I know this because I've done this in previous projects as well. If you take the full user query, so the like full original question, and you search it with a text search against the database, they're like, that question is not in that identical order going to be in there, right? So what you need to do is the following. It's just like literally updating as I talk, which is nice. So you first extract meaningful keywords with an LLM, which is just a simple prompt. Like I can see, so it's going to do filler words. Not really be happy with how it's doing all of this. It should use a library for that. And then here you can see system prompt. You extract search word for PostgreSQL. Here's what it should do. And then let's see, it's like terms list. Okay, that's great. So we keep running this. That's okay. The only thing I don't want this. We need to do something else with that. That's just ugly. So I am already, let's see. Okay, that's looking great so far. However, I don't like the filler words. Is there a library that we can use in order to remove those filler words? I think we could use something from NLTK, right? Can we just import a lean set from that? Or is there another library that handles this for us? So what I can do, I can already send this out. So now it's queued. So this will keep on running. We can come back over here. Okay, so for the source, showing the slide, which layout do you prefer? Slide over sheet, simpler works. Yeah, that's totally fine. So that means when we click on the source, we have a slide out panel from the side where we can actually see where the information was coming from. Okay, good. Let's see, low value words. How is this doing? This is still running. Let's just keep working on that. Let's actually come back to our assistant and try to better understand our retrieval pipeline. So I pretty much understand everything up until, let's see, the grounding validator. That is still a little bit of a black box for me. And I think we can probably better understand that if we read our instructions, right? Because this is pretty much what it should do. So here is how the, let's see. Just like I'm multitasking too much because I can see already NLTK. Okay, wait. Short answer. What is this? Okay, yeah, NLTK. Yeah, it is like it's a BV library. We can get a stop words out of it. Well, again, anyway, we can optimize that later if we want. For now, I'm not really happy with all of those manual words in there, but let's keep it for now. Optimization later, and then we can already let the model start working on the plan to build out the UI while we go through our system prompt of our agent, right? So what we do, we have tools, and it's going to cite everything. Here's the corpus and then the tool usage. So start with search filings. And yeah, okay. Prefer read chunks where you need full text for multiple chunks. Yeah, okay. So the thing is how this is set up. If you, and I like this. This is what you would work towards. But let's see what we're doing over here. We go to Pydantic because this is pretty much where the magic happens. So normally, if you set up any type of RAG pipeline, right? You would get the user query, would go to like your front application, and via the backend you retrieve the data. And normal RAG pipelines are very pretty much any tutorial that you see on YouTube is very naive. Simple examples, just like here's the user query, embed it, get it, and here is what the model should do. Now we extended that already with hybrid search, so it also does some keyword-based matching off of that, but still it's very naive. It's just like does the calculation, but then it gathers the final list and it chucks that into the system prompt, and it just says, look, here's everything, go answer the user query. And there's no way to have a fallback or to course correct, because in case it did not find enough evidence, the default loop is not implemented. And what it did over here, which is, I think it's already quite good, is instead of making it naive, we set up a Pydantic AI agent, but where the looping mechanism comes in is when we give it access to those tools. Because with Pydantic out of the box, when you have an agent and you have tools, the agent can use those tools and it can then check what kind of answer it gets back from that and then use tools again. So that's why it can search filings, it can read chunks, it can read a chunk, and it can also read surrounding chunks. So this is already quite a sophisticated way to go through our data, capture everything using multiple mechanisms, bring everything together. But then also when it decides it needs more information, it can go back in the database and it can read surrounding chunks. That's really one of the clever things over here. So that's all implemented here in the tools. So if you see what this essentially does is, if we have any type of retrieved chunk, we can have a radius around that. So you can see the retrieval radius is set up over here. So let's see, retrieval neighbor is set to 1. So it will take that chunk and it will also look around it. And here we're really bringing together the thing is, this could be an entire 2-hour video just on this retrieval pipeline to really help you understand what's going on over here. But we're combining essentially hybrid search with agentic search, and we're bringing them together. So I think if we start to experiment with it, the queries will probably take 60 seconds or so. It will take some time to get an answer, but it will already become quite good because it can go through these documents. So if we then look at the whole grounding process, at the grounded answer, you can see these are also then the data models that we're getting back, that we're getting to. So this is cool to see. Okay, this is also already completed. So now let's continue. I already get quite a little bit of a better understanding as to how our pipeline works. So now we should be able to run some queries in the browser. Let's see. We're going to refresh this. Okay, that's already a great start. We may need to, let's see, where are we? Let's run everything one more shit. I need to. Let's come over here and run our backend again. That's good. And also run our frontend again. Where are we? There we go. Okay, so now you can see we have an error over here because pretty much if I create a new chat, we get an unprocessable entity. So that's not good. So let's see. We can still do this in here because it's pretty much the same task. We can say, oh, where am I? When I try to create a new message, new conversation in the front end, we get an unprocessable content. So can you check the backend all the way to the front end to see if this is implemented correctly and debug? Now, and then this is typically, I feel like this is the point where we might run into some of the issues of Composer 2.5. I feel like if we would have used GPT 5.5, this wouldn't have happened. So let's see how we can solve that and how quickly we can get onto that. And then what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to use Opus 4.8 over here, and it's also time to do another checkpoint. Okay. One skill that I am going to use is front-end design. So this is a skill, if you don't have it already, front-end design skill. It's from Anthropic. It's this skill. This combined with the models from Anthropic always works really well if we want to do anything design related. And what I want to do is I want to pretty much let it rip on just the visual components of things. And here's how I would prompt that. Let's first see if this works. Let's see. Because that would be a good checkpoint. Doesn't work. Okay. We may need to switch to a beefier model at this point. Because like I've said, normally this would just work. Now we got an error. Eh? Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do, fresh thread, I'm going to do GPT 5.5 hide. And I'm going to say, some previous agents worked on connecting the backend with the front end, but I'm not sure if everything is wired up correctly. Can you do an audit and really check correctly whether the API communicates correctly with the front end and how we can create a new conversation and whether everything is set up correctly, also driving into the database? That's then what I would do. And also I would pretty much, whenever something like this happens, like this chat is off, boom, it's broken. Don't continue in that with kind of like try to fix it. You usually need to zoom out, clear context, and in this case also a beefier model. And then let's come back to the UI because we do have this over here. So, okay, this is, okay, I'm going to yap a little bit, but this, I think you're going to learn a lot from this. So anything front-end related. Here's how I would do this. Come back over here. I'm going to use Glido persistent mode. You are going to help me to create a really cool design for our front-end application. First, your goal should be to understand what we're creating. So we're building an internal tool. We have the user login, then we have the sidebar with the conversations. User also needs to be able to log out. And we're going to use the shadcn components. So what I want you to do is I want you to look online and I want you to figure out what are the best practices around creating these chat applications, right? There are a lot of examples. What are the elements that we need from a user experience and user interface point of view in order to make this just a pretty application that just works? Now, we don't need to go fancy here with all kinds of coloring. We just simply use black and white and use the shadcn components, but I want it to look proper. Like, think about the side menu bar that we have over there. Like, we can maybe hide it, we can open it up, we have the user settings at the bottom, we can log out the user, then we have the list with all of the conversation histories, and also then what does the chat interaction look like with all of the citations and the loop, and while users are waiting for feedback. I want all of that in there. So first start doing your research, look at what we have currently, then perform kind of like a gap analysis and create a plan to implement everything for the front end, to really view it through the lens of like a proper system, and also, whenever possible, reuse components. So try to set up some kind of like design system where we can reuse the components over and over again, instead of like trying to create all of these isolated components again and again and again. That was a yap, long yap, with the help of Glido to easily do this for me and correct everything that I needed. There's also a little bit of formatting on top of that. Now, was there a particular like structure to all of that? Switch to play mode. Yes, switch to play mode. Not really, but there were a couple of important things that if you pay close attention, that going to make all the difference. Do research, use a good anthropic model, high reasoning, mention UX UI, use the front end design skill, mention design system to use a design system, and I think that's it. I think those were the most important things. So now this is, as you can see, this is going to send off a backend, a background job. This will continue to run for a while. So okay, what do we got over here? This is the beefier model coming into play. Yeah, so this is the now we got the big model jumping in to look at some of the changes we need to make. So let's just run this and run a couple of tests before we are done. Okay, and so while the other agent is working, we get some questions from the front-end application. So it asks, okay, which chat components do you want to use, right? You already use the AI SDK plus, so PromptKit is a natural fit. This is actually a nice library, so let's give this a spin. So you can see PromptKit, it gives us this ChatGPT-like vibe, you know, so we can import all of these components. So let's say, okay, let's do that. How strict should the black and white theme be? Light only, like, yeah, okay, let's just, shouldn't be only black and white. Gray is okay, gray is okay. Okay, let's see, how is this going? So GPT 5.5 already found some issues here. So let's see while that works on everything. And look, you can also see like the simpler, like the smaller model worked fine in the beginning, but we are quickly kind of like ramping up in complexity. And right now we don't have a simple project anymore. This is already like, okay, we have a project. We got a lot of moving components. We need to make sure everything is set up properly. So this is really where bigger models really help, unless you continue to go bite-sized, right? Also, like the things I also noticed, like in the beginning, I was like, oh, let's do this first and then check this, right? But I also noticed that if I continue like that, this will be like a 2-day video in order to do that. So I also want to find the balance between showing, okay, how fast can you go while using some simple methods, and what do we need to offload to the heavier model. So, okay, this is running. Now we are going to create the plan. This is running. Okay. Let's see. So the monochrome, it's called the monochrome chat design. Perfect, cool. Strict light monochrome, neutral grays, yes. Layout, industry, it's going to do cleanup, app shell. Yeah, this is all front. I'm just checking to make sure it's not going to mess with anything on the back end, because that's what we're working on right now. Okay, let's kick this off. And this is always really fun, right? I mean, with the backend stuff, we just tell it what to do, and you kind of like expect it to do just that. With front end here, I have no idea what it's going to come up with. So remember, right now, our front end looks like this. So let's see what Claude Opus 4.8 in this case is going to make out of it, while GPT 5.5 is still trying to clean up the mess, I guess. Okay, and that audit is now gone, and it adjusted. So it had something to do with the chat files, both in the database, the schema, and let's see, this is just the tests. So we needed to update something there in order to make it work. So let's see, we can now create a new chat. So let's see, let's create another one. Got a new chat. Now, again, you can see from the UI, it's a little bit clunky. I don't really like it, but let's see what actually happens if we submit this. So you can see there's already some stuff going on. And let's see, if I open up, you can see the logs right now. So it's actually doing something. So you can see analyzing, searching, reading, verifying. So this is already like, this is cool. to see the process working. I would love a little bit more feedback or some kind of like loading. Okay, so it's good. And the thing is, because it has this tool loop already, that's why it actually takes quite some time to go through all of this. So now it's verifying and boom, we got an error. So let's see what we got. So this is why we want to have the terminal open to see, okay, that's a big error message, but what went wrong over here? It tried to get something. It's like there was something with the message citation that violates a null constraint. So it's something with the data model. Let's see. So a couple of things. I mean, the thing is like this already, this, okay, yeah, I see. This is actually the answer, but there's a couple of things wrong with it. First of all, it cannot format the markdown table. So that's something that the front end should implement. But look, you can already see we got some cool stuff over here. This is getting quite, but it's centered. That's weird. And this, and we just should have markdown formatting in it. So let's plug this. Let's see. I thought I copied it, but I guess not. So we're going to copy the error, come back in here, use Glido and say, okay, I just run a query and can you check what's going on over here? Kind of like what's going on with the citation message and fix, please. You should always add that. That makes it work. Okay. Now our Claude Opus agent is also, let's see, looks like this is literally waiting on a user input. Just checking if it isn't somewhere. Now, let's see, can you continue? Tell me what I need to run if you get stuck. I saw, so you can see it tried to, let's see. So we were stuck on an import, right? Because we were getting the prompt kit in here. So you can see we do shadcn and we get the prompt kit and it asks, look, avatar.txt already exists. Would you like to override it? And then it got stuck in the process over there. So now it's going to run that with the yes flag. So let's see if it now works, because otherwise we just need to do it manually. This is also one of those things where usually I just prefer AI to like hand over the command to me to run it, because this is still ass. Give me the command I need to run. Where are we? We just need to go, let's see, run this command. We need to be in the front end, and then we just add all of those blocks. Okay, let's see. Let's create a new terminal. CD into the front end, and let's run that. Okay, done. Now continue. That should do it. And now also let's see what we got going on. Fix the citation error because it was not null. Okay. So now we should be able to come back. I mean, yeah, this is ugly. I keep doing those checkpoints. Checkpoint. Okay, so now if we do new chat and we say, let's do this. Let's run one more query to see if we don't get the error now. And the formatting will still be a little bit messy, because that's what our other model is working on right now, because now the dependencies are all in. Okay, and there we go. Like there's still a lot that we need to optimize, but there is an answer in here. It got the relevant chunks. I need markdown formatting in here, but this is a little weird here, but you can see it is already set up the conversation with a name. We can sign out here. So this is starting to look like something we can use. And now it's just, we need to, like, this is going to be a big one that runs through all of this. Okay, and while the front-end agent continues to optimize things, let's see, this is opening a terminal. I don't need it here. Let's quickly go one more time over the full pipeline, because this is the part of the process where we went really quick, and I just asked AI to just write it in plain English to understand what's going on behind the scenes, because this also what kind of like blew my mind, that it kind of like one-shotted that whole tool loop. So what you should understand, we created our agent.py. So we did that using Pydantic. So That's what we said over here. And Pydantic AI abstracts a lot really of the heavy lifting around working with language models. So which model, the chat conversations, the system prompt, the tool use, the tool calling, that's all abstracted within this agent.py. And when we do like the run document agent, so when we run thing, it takes the instructions. So this is instructions is the system prompt. Essentially, this says, okay, here's how you should behave. And then what happens is, wait, where are we? Open preview. What happens is the agent has a set of tools. So first of all, it's going to run the search filings. So this is the retrieval pipeline that we set up, right? The hybrid retrieval. It's going to do the embeddings. It's going to do the full text search. It ranks them. It takes top K, fuses them. That's how all of that is set up. Now you can see it includes nearby neighbors chunks by default. So this was already a design choice that was added in there. We set nearby neighbors to 1. So it already, every chunk that is retrieved, we add a neighbor around it as well to give it a little bit more context. The agent then decides whether the returned excerpts are enough to answer. So that is also something that within the instructions is decided. And this is really nice about having the tool loop, so that it's not this naive path that I explained, right? Where it's like, here are the documents, go answer. And if you don't know it, simply say that you don't know it. Like, that's naive. And it will, for the user, it can result in weird things. Now there's a decision-making step where the model actually decides, okay, this is all the retrieved information. Can I synthesize an answer from this? And if it's the case, we force it to create a grounded answer using, again, this is structured output, the Pydantic model. If not, it can use the read chunks and the read chunk tools in order to go back into the database manually and do agentic search around the queries, for example, or the chunks that we already retrieved. So then once we have that final answer, we're going to run the validator. So this is an additional like guardrail that we put on top of here that is implemented here, where it's going to again check one more time. Look, do we have enough information? And it's going to give a hard yes or no pass. And only if here it decides that it doesn't have enough information, it's going to explain or tell that to the user, which is explained over here. So after the agent returns validator, compares the structured answer against the registry, it tracks the answer citation contract and verifies every kind of like citation that we get, and rejects chunks IDs that were never retrieved, and requires each except to be copied from the register chunk. Okay, so that whole part, this whole validator, then ultimately says, okay, this is good to go. We can give our answer, or we say no, and it will pretty much tell the user, look, we could not find an answer that we could ground any information. Now, again, any of these little building blocks that you see over here, you could probably spend a day or two optimizing all of those. That is what I want to keep stressing over here, even though this is like a speed run project, right? This is not how it goes in the real world. You need to set it up first and then make sure to go, to go back and keep iterating on it. So let's see where we are with the front end. We'll resume when background shell exit. What's going on over here? Check environment variables. Where we are. Okay. This is already looking pretty cool. I'm not sure if it's done already. I do see a couple of weird quirks, but let's see if we create a new chat. Okay. I like this. I like this. I don't like this. Okay. Already going to create a screenshot. I'm going to say, I don't like that. I don't like that. And I don't like this. And I also don't like these loading dots. So this is a tool, by the way, this is CleanShot. I use this on Mac. This is really helpful because what I can do now is I can come in here and I just want to check if it did. Yeah, okay. I think this is done, but it's just somehow stuck in this loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back over here, start a new session, and I'm going to So one agent just worked on the front-end application, and there are a couple of things that I would like to adjust. I attached a screenshot with numbers. First of all, if you look at number 1, there is a little glitch in there. There's a divider. Get rid of that. Then number 2, we got this like default AI sparkle thingy. Skip that. I don't want that. We don't need anything there. Just remove it. Okay, then number 3 is the whole cycle of going between or through analyzing, searching, reading. I don't like how that looks. Can you just like create on the kind of like show a loading state in text that kind of like has a gradient going on over it? So a gradient wipe of color of gray. And then simply as you go, first show analyzing and then show searching. So we don't show the whole thing, but we simply replace it. And then also number 4, it shows these 3 dots. I don't know what that is. So can you improve that as well? It's pretty much the whole interaction around like what happens when a user is waiting for a question. That is something that I want you to optimize right now. Boom! And don't you just love how fast Glido is? I mean, you should really try it out. Okay, let's just work on this now and then come back and check if we actually, so this is, okay, we got the table renderer in here. That is good. So now we need to get rid of this is good. Yeah, so now I want another. So now pretty much where we are arriving, we are making great progress. And before I really go into optimizing this thing, I want to go back to our to-do lists pretty much and see, okay, where are we at? So phase 8, before we actually are going to deploy this, the pilot readiness. What do we need? We have running locally, documents, 10 examples, confirm, like the scale, structured logging. This is more so like a test. I think I'm going to like let an agent run on this. And then in parallel, I'm going to work a little bit on UI refinements because we're pretty much getting there. And I want to get this out to the deployment quickly because that's the most interesting learning part. And then I want to wrap up this video to show you the iteration loop of how to improve this. So I'm going to do the following. And since this is kind of like review stuff, I am going to do the following. We have entered phase 8 of this project. Phase 8 is pretty much doing a bunch of checks. And like not everything is directly relevant right now. Can you just do a review and analysis of the code base and pretty much see if we are ready for phase 8 to cross everything off? And just make sure that everything works, everything runs, run a couple of tests and see if there's anything we missed based on the client brief so far. Like all like user feedback and whether it actually saves them time, I will take care of that. Like don't worry about it. And I'm not going to take care of it because I'm not going to test it within the scope of this video. But let's run this and then slowly start to prep for the, so this is working on something. I'm going to create one more agent, ramping things up because what I essentially had, right? We had this, there are a couple of things that happen when you click on a citation and I want you to improve this. So first of all, I've noticed that when you click on the inline citations, it opens a new browser tab. So can you make sure that clicking an inline citation also opens the right citation on the right bar? And then second, can we format the original sources or the chunks that have been retrieved? Can we format that in a markdown table? And also, can we also show the neighboring chunks around it to make sure we give a little bit more context? Because now it feels a little bit out of nowhere if you just show the table. What would that look like? It could be that there is an issue with the markdown tables because it's not strictly markdown. If that is the case, can you tell me how we could potentially solve that? Okay, so what I referred to was, first of all, the following. If I click on this, it kind of like opens up a new tab, something I noticed. And I just wanted, if you click on 2, it should open up this. And then also, like this is, of course, very messy. And I think this issue has to do what we noticed all the way at the beginning, right? Where Docling had a hard time extracting the PDF the markdown tables, right, from the HTML files. So that's why that may be a little bit messy. So I'm not sure how that works. And I want a little bit of context around this. I want what was before and after so I can actually see this. I want to get rid of this. But other than that, I mean, don't get me wrong. We're literally building ChatGPT over here. So this is pretty cool, right? So we may see the occasional glitches over here. So I can also sign out. So look, this is also, it's cool, right? We got a cool app, Drift. Oh, okay, yeah, this is what happens when you start messing with things as an AI agent is working on it. So we may just need to be a little bit careful here. I'm actually going to let this run and then come back. And while we're at it, just like let's put the cherry on top. Go to flat icon. I search for wood. I think this would work really well. So let's see. Let's get we do the free download over here. Let's get that over here, and then let's get the log and put that into our project. So let's see, where is my project? Let's put it into public over here. And now let's say, okay. We can go back to Composer fast. Let's take the log. Can you take the icon that lives on the top of the menu bar and then use a black background, but then use this log as the icon, and also make sure you update the favicon with this as well. So we actually create an avatar around this, and then this becomes the main logo for our application. Okay, that was the wrong choice, or maybe just need some visual feedback. I don't like the rounded corners here, and let's see, I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to say 1, 2, take this, come back. Okay, please look at the image attached. You can see we need some padding. So there are 2 places, of course. First of all, make sure that we have some padding. So it sits nicely in the center and there's enough negative space, bottom, center, front, right? And also on the second image that you see that I labeled with 2, you can see the corners are too rounded there. So please unify that with what we see in the menu bar. Going back to GPT 5.5 in order to try and solve that and see if we can make that a little bit cooler. Do we also have our favicon? Usually, like browser cache can prevent that from loading. So I guess we'll have to check that later. But this is already looking pretty cool. That is looking much better. That looks like the logo of a very professional investment analysis firm, right? I mean, no, it doesn't match, but I like it for now. Meanwhile, I also implemented the function that we can actually delete conversations. It looks a little bit clunky, a little bit AI generated, but for now, I think it's good. If we come in here and we actually look at the source documents, this is already starting to look way better as well. We may still need to do a little bit of cleanup here because there's definitely something with those tables that is not 100% correct, but we are getting there. Okay, also, does it work if we click on this? Yeah, so you can now see. Okay, perfect. Okay, now this is starting to look really good, and I actually want to move to the deployment side of things, so we can also start to kind of move towards the end of this video. There's one thing that I don't like, and that is still the issue with the table. So again, this is probably a bigger problem to solve, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to let one research agent go at it to see if we can fix it using the easy button. So I'm coming back. I'm going to use GPT 5.5 high. You know what? Let's make it extra high. Let's spend some time here. But then if we do that, we also need a good prompt. So let's do that. Okay, so I need your help with one thing. So we got quite a nice pipeline going on over here. We can take all of the HTML files, then we use docling to extract that, and then we chunk it using docling and we put it into the database. Now, there's one issue that the documents that we are working with contain a whole bunch of tables. And I feel like the current extraction method is a little bit fragile for what we are trying to accomplish. Because if I look at the citations over here, you can see it's just a little bit messy. And since this is so critical to this project, I feel like we need a better way to extract the tables. And the thing is, since the original files are HTML files, we can probably extract them from the HTML files with a dedicated service for that. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the current problem, look at the input HTML files, and then look at the output markdown files and see where the issues are coming from when it comes to formatting these tables. And then you should check and search online and validate whether we can fix this using Docling or whether we need a better approach to do this. Because I could also see a version, because it's HTML, where we write a custom extractor specifically for these types of documents. So we parse it and we essentially convert it to Markdown, and we have a special converter for the tables. So I want you to understand the whole problem and give me your plan for what's going to result in the ultimate best and most accurate parsing of this data, and also later down the line chunking and putting it into a vector database. So you should consider the whole pipeline. Bam. Okay, that was a big one, eh? Now I again should put this on planning. There we go. Okay. So this is going to run. This is doing something, and now let's go to the deployment side of things. So as I've said, I have never used Railway. I literally just created an account. So you can see I have 30 days, $5 left. So the whole goal is that we can set this up for free. Now, what we want to do is we have a little bit of a special setup because we have both the frontend and the backend in one GitHub repository. So what I did is I asked AI to give me a guide for Railway on how we should set up this project. So let's actually go through it. We have this, and it did a couple of things. So first of all, it created Docker ignore files, and it also created a Docker file for the front end, because I think there's no way around it, because we really need to set up the project properly in order to be able to deploy this. So let's see how this goes. Usually for all of our projects, we have, if you look at, for example, our GenAI Launchpad and the project starter pack that we use for all of our projects, it already comes wired with Docker files, because that's how we always like to set up our project. So that's why this is for me a little bit like figuring out what the right way to do is. And I guess it's also just going to be trial and error with this, because it first lets me ask like, what is it going to... So we check how good it actually is, because let me actually see if I can walk through it. So let's first kind of like update this. Okay. And we actually published that branch, so the development branch. And now I am going to say, let's just see how good it is. Railway, let's put it to the test. I have a mono repository with both a front end and a back end, and I want to deploy both. The back end communicates with the front end. The back end is a Python application using FastAPI, and the front end application is a plain React app built in TypeScript that we run via Fight. Let's make sure we spell that correctly, and let's see what Railway will come up with. I probably should have mentioned that we're also using Supabase externally already, so we just need to connect with that. Okay, so when I try to set up the connection with GitHub, it asked me to authorize via GitHub. And here is a tip that I can give you whenever you are testing out these new tools. I'm usually not a big fan of these. Like I've said, when we do production deployments, we use Azure, we use Hetzner or whatever, and we do everything manually. Because what I don't like about these tools is that you essentially give them access. And out of the box, usually it's all repositories. And that means if someone compromises this whole system on Railway and it can somehow access and act on your behalf, it has access to all of your GitHub repositories. So whenever you do use stuff like this, make sure that you scope it off. So instead of all repositories, I say, look, only selected repository. So I'm only going to give the Document Copilot access. Okay, so once I go through that loop, and you may need to refresh your project, it took a little bit for it to recognize, I can now select my project over here. So now this is all new to me. So let's see what we want. So I'm going to deploy from development, which usually is not something you want to do. And now we just need to see how we can set up this is actually, because I always hate kind of like the setups like this. I may even see if we can use the Railway CLI, because this can get really tricky in order to get it right. So what I probably want to do, let's see, I'm going to install this via Brew. Because the thing is, well, otherwise we just have to click through all of these and set everything up and do the startup command. And then we need to do that for the front end as well. Whereas if we can use our agent to pretty much like look into the CLI, it's going to be way faster, and you're also going to be able to check way more settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a terminal, and let's do a new one. This is our backend running. I'm going to do brew install Railway. So if you're on Windows, you can use the following command over here. And let's see, then we need to just authenticate that, which we can do after the installation. So let's clear this up. Let's log in, open the browser. Now let's see, for now, this is the only workspace I have. So for now, that's totally fine to manage that. So now the authentication is successful. So now I should be able to have access in here. And then what I probably want to do is check Railway MCP. Do they have an MCP server? I want to get that for Cursor. And I'm simply going to check. Let's see. First of all, it's going to get that out of here. And I'm going to do Cursor settings. I'm going to see if we can, let's see, MCP, if I can search for this. Let's see, manage view bear strap. Okay. So we can actually do it like this. We get MCP servers, and we just need Railway like this, and then probably it could be that we don't even need the CLI if we use the MCP. So can you access the Railway MCP? Because we may need to authenticate that one. Because if we now go back in here, you see, we connect. Okay, so different setup. This is always a little bit confusing, but if we use the MCP from Cursor, we don't really need the CLI. So now it should let's see. Let's ask that one more time. Can you access the Railway MCP? Beautifully typed. That's what you get when you use Glido all the time. Like you stop you stop typing properly. Okay. So now, because now what we can do is, first of all, we can check. Okay, that worked on that one. We got a plan for, let's see, this is the table extraction. So this is a big one on the side. Not sure if I already want to run this. The current pipeline has the right high-level shape, but the wrong table representation. So recommendation, use a hybrid to keep docling for narrative sections, headings, and basic, but add a SSP-specific HTML table extractor. Okay, this is going to make it better. This is probably going to require us to run the document pipeline again. So that is a little bit of a risk there, but I know it's going to improve the outcome, and I want to show you how to do this. So I'm just going to hit build on this one. Okay. So now here's what we can now do, which is going to be the cool thing. Now that we have our Railway MCP server and our deployment guide, we can ask our AI to help us with this, and we don't have to tinker through menus. Okay, can you now take the steering wheel and set up our project in Railway using the MCP server? First, confirm if you have access to it. Just want to check, because this was an older file, a chat message. Sometimes sometimes old chats need to be kind of closed and opened again before it can access all of the MCPs. But let's just see if this one has access to it. Yes, okay. Checking the read-only project schemas. Yeah, okay. So now, and the thing is, it created this kind of dummy project. But I probably just want the whole MCPs to create the entire project. without this kind of like default name in here. Okay, yes, I have everything authenticated, registered, one existing project. Before I need to go ahead with, okay, fuck it. Let's use Cheerful Generosity. That's the project we want to use. Does it make sense? Nah, it doesn't make sense. Let's call it document. Let's do the actual document pilot because that's way better. Let's create a new project, call it Document Pilot, and let's just use that. And can you deeply search into the railway documentation as well as the structure of our code base and make sure everything is in place, and then create one plan in order to deploy everything. Also, let me know if there's anything else you need from me, whether that's like providing credentials. We have everything in the repository, so feel free to also use the CLI in order to input the variables on Railway. Okay, now I do want to give a note here. On the deployment side of things, I'm going pretty YOLO mode here. MCP server, giving access to credentials. This is not something that I would do on a client project. Again, we have our own Docker files. We have Hetzner or Azure where we deploy. We have our secret vaults where we put the API keys in here so they don't even live in the project. So there is still a gap between what I'm showing here and really what you would call production ready and how AI engineering works in the real world. But this is just a fine balance between seeing things end to end while still being able to bite size it into one video, right? So that's the constant kind of like thing that you have to keep in mind over here. So I'm going to let this run and kind of like come up with the plan, and then also run so this is also our big extractor that's going to work on extracting the HTML tables. That's going to improve our application. I'll get back to you once all of this is done. Okay, so it came back with the plan for deployment, and I am simply going to hit build on that right now. We're going to use the Railway MCP server to go through this. So one more time over here to the dashboard, and it should create a new project. So let's see what this is going to do. And while we're at this, I am going to show you kind of like one thing. That is, at Datalumina, we have one project, or course really, I should say, which is called the GenAI Accelerator. So this is our flagship technical program where in 6 weeks, I teach you AI engineering really from first principles and everything that we do on our client projects. So like I've said, what you're seeing is in this video is a speed run. Like this video will be 4.5 hours, I think, something like that. Maybe I trim it down a little bit, or we still run into something and it takes 5 hours. But you can see on the GenAI Accelerator, it is split. It's not split up over like 4 hours. It's split up over literally 6 weeks of content. And there is, I believe, over 60 hours or so for everything that there is to it. So instead of just fast tracking everything and hitting the easy button on AI and let just AI figure everything out, in this course, I teach you everything really step by step. We'll break down, we'll look into the exact steps, into the prompts, into the loops, into the tool calling, into the design patterns and principles that we're using, into like how to use Docker properly, all the way to also deploying your AI applications, but doing it with a production rigor, right? Because again, this is going to be fun. I'm really excited to see what this is going to end up with, and it's easy for you to follow along. But this is just not something that you do in the real world, right? Your whole CI/CD pipeline, your deployments, that is just not something you give to an MCP and let it rip. I am only okay with doing this because I know, first of all, that I'm going to nuke the database and all my API keys after this video. So that's one thing. And also all of the data that we're using is public data. So there's nothing in this project that I want to hide, like literally nothing. So given that, I am okay with this. So you should approach this in a similar fashion, even if you're using your own API credentials, like just chugging that in there and letting the AI set everything up. If you really want to be careful, like just like remove your credentials or refresh them after you've worked with AI on this. So that is just something just to keep in mind that I can't stress enough, because there is still a big difference between what AI engineering looks like in the real world and really what we're doing over here. So if you are enjoying this type of work really in these types of projects, and you really want to do AI engineering seriously, not just for, I don't know, a hobby project, but this is in your career to advance your career, or you want to do this as a freelancer, you can check out the accelerator. I will leave a link in the description for you to check out. Now that we're on that, if you feel like you really are already kind of like capable enough to start freelancing, I have another project for you. So next to everything that I do with Data Lumen and our agency, we run 2 courses pretty much in coaching programs. It's the accelerator, and this is Data Freelancer, where we pretty much teach you how to start as a freelancer and start landing freelance jobs like on top of your tech job. Or if you're unemployed right now, like it could become your full-time thing. But it is essentially designed for people who currently have a full-time job. So you can do this next to your job, get started. So that is also something you can check out if you're interested in that and you've been liking the content so far. A little bit of a plug. Now let's go back to, let's see, our Document Copilot. I love how this is just showing up right now. So we can see our backend coming together, and we can see our front end coming together. So there's something happening. There is something happening. Cool. Yeah. So as you know, so when we are deploying to Railway, it's of course going to use internal but publicly facing domains, right? So you can see you have, I don't know where this up is coming from. Up could be that is Railway internally. So it uses up railway.app, but the Document Copilot backend production, that is now what we are, and it could even be that because this is the production. Yeah. Okay. So it's production.up.railway.app. So this now becomes an actual deployment, because similar to what we were running locally, right? We were running on, what was it? Port 8, I believe it's port 8000 that we're running on. So this is now, you can also see if you do docs, because FastAPI exposes this by default, which is something a lot of people don't know. So now you can see, look, this is now our API documentation, but this is localhost, right? So what you can see right now, if we deploy our backend and we don't kind of like protect this via some kind of firewall or like IP restriction, this becomes public. And once this is deployed, people can also literally just view your docs and they can see your endpoints. Now, for an internal tool, this is something you don't really want, right? So there's a lot of extra additional stuff that you need to keep in mind when you're going to throw actual client data at it. So let's see if this is actually already doing something. Could even be that the thing is, it could even be that because I'm doing it via the MCP, that it's setting this up properly. But let's see if it does that. So it creates the backend. Let's see. The backend is public domain. Yeah. Okay, still in progress. Well, we need a little bit more time here. So you can see the build now. Interesting. And pretty much if this is the first time you're working with the deploy, pretty much all we're doing right now is we're putting this code, this backend folder, on a server. And once the code is there, we run our startup command, which is this. So the code lives on a server, which is pretty much just a computer that's always on instead of doing it locally. We run the startup command, so it actually exposes, and then Railway then has this way of exposing it via a public domain, right? So that is usually something that you have to set up yourself. But this is where just Railway makes it easy. So we get that domain that we just saw. Okay, now little update progress on this, because this can always be really annoying when you are using anything other really than a virtual machine, where you can directly deploy and just run the exact same commands as you do on locally. You get into errors, and these platforms always can have a tendency to just hide a whole bunch of the information that you need to see. So we can now, here we have a sneak peek into the logs and see what it was doing, but it essentially failed. So this process is also going to look different for you. So the thing is, the final repository will be final right for you. So everything is there. And probably I can also create some type of deployment script in there, depending on how Railway and what Railway supports, if I can put some type of YAML file in there. But this could also be the part where you have to do some extra tinkering in order to get this up correctly. And that's also where you learn, right? So I'm just going to check, like the MCP is still going at it. So it's going to check the logs, and it probably will continue in a loop to continue with this. But yeah, this is not like the prettiest example or demo really to walk you through, because this is kind of like new. But let's just fast forward to when we fix this, and then I'll tell you how to properly set it up and what you can do to avoid this. Okay, and we're back. It's also the next day because I had to go out for dinner. But look, we got our backend and we got our front end deployed. So there were a couple of changes that we had to make during the deployment process. So luckily for you, everything is going to be in the repository. So as you kind of like go through this and have the final result next to it, you have a little cheat code, right? You can look into it to avoid messing with that. So pretty much what it came down to, you can see on our work tree, we have a whole bunch of diffs because there was also one agent working on the tables. Remember to optimize that. But pretty much what was required for Railway was a Docker setup both on the backend. So this is the Docker file in order to set that up, and also on the front end, also the Docker file, and even a caddy file to expose the endpoints and essentially make this available via HTTP. So again, if you've never worked with this is quite abstract here for now. I can't really go into what all of this means. The best thing always to do is, of course, like just use AI, literally use AI and ask, look, what is this caddy file? What is it used for? That's ultimately the best way to learn. So right now, I'm going to show you how we can wrap this up and how you can essentially work with this yourself and also continue to improve this. So a couple of things. So first, the agent that I asked to improve the table structure did its job. Look at this. Now we got actual proper tables. So this is really cool. This is actually, it's coming together quite nicely. So in our database, we now also have a document tables where you can see we have the document ID, the table index, and then you can see the actual markdown and it extracted to actual JSON data. Because remember, right, when we were working with the documents, let's pick one of those. Let's see, open in the browser, one of those files, right? Because they're H files, they are structured. All the tables, they have a structured format. So it's better to just rely on HTML parsing in order to get this out. So that's what I asked GPT-5 in this case to set up. And you'll find under the ingest that there is load source documents. So, and then also the section tables. So these are helper functions to extract the tables correctly. So in the process, I had to redo essentially all of the chunks for the to extract the tables properly, right? So if we now have the source documents and we have the document chunks, that is now correctly referencing the documents table, I believe. And we still have to, like, if I look into this, this is still a little bit ugly. I do have to check if I may still have to clean up some records in here. So that could be the case, that we need to do some cleaning. But if we now come over to our application again, right? So we can ask a question, we get the answer back, we get a beautifully rendered markdown table, and we can even look at the sources, and it will load exactly where it's coming from. Also the neighboring citation or the neighboring chunk. So this is, for me, already like a perfect kind of like end-to-end example of what a solution like this could look like. So here I also want to wrap up. Of course, there's tons of more stuff that we can do to improve this, to make it faster, to make it cheaper, to make it more reliable. But that is a whole process on its own. So what I want you to show right now is give you a little bit more insights into the deployment process on Railway, right? So I'm going to first create a checkpoint over here. Let's commit that. Let's also just sync that in there. So in the guides, there is a railway deployment guide in here. And I updated this based on what went wrong during our deployment. And also, by the way, I remember one issue that we ran into as well was that the agent at some point added a docling in the main dependencies. And docling is quite an extensive library. So if you try and install that on, let's say, a compute that has like low RAM or doesn't have a bit large enough or enough CPUs, it can error on that. So it's really important to keep that in the dev dependencies, in the optional dependencies here. So there is that. And okay, now let's come back to what is going on over here. So I use the MCP server in order to help me walk through this. But what I want to check right now is I first of all want to check if we can actually go over here, right? So if we now, so this is our backend. So that is expected. I need to go to our frontend application because now we can see, instead of just doing it at localhost, you can see over here at the top right, we can actually go to document-copilot-frontend-production up railway. So if this is now a public URL, like after this, I will take it down. But this is now, you like at this moment of recording, you could go to this website. And then if you would use my credentials, you could log in to this. So that's also something that I want you to be aware of as you start to use and start to deploy this. So right now we have a very simple just username, password, login, right? So probably, especially if you want to deploy this for a client, make sure that's a little bit better protected. Maybe use like a Google sign-in, at least like a 2-factor authentication. Make sure that as you work with your documents, you keep running some like security checks to make sure all the endpoints are properly protected. But now we have a live version. So this is literally something that we could share with someone. We could now go into Supabase and we could create another. If I go to authentication, I go to users, you can see over here. I could create a user and I could add another analyst in here. I could give them their password and then auto confirm, like this is the simple approach. And I could send them those credentials and then they can log in and they can start using the app. They have their own history, their own kind of like little setup over here. And now they can start to ask questions. If I open up a new chat here, let's see if this also, this local host, let's come over here to the real one. Let's create a new chat. It's taking a little bit long. I may have to check what's going on over there. But now let's see. Let's run one for NVIDIA. So how did NVIDIA describe demand, drivers, customer concentration? Okay, now again, this will go in search. Now, please be aware that currently how it's set up, we focus on getting, like really making sure we're right and grounding the answer in all of the chunks, which is what you want to do with a solution like this. But as you'll see, it's like working in a loop. It's using GPT 5.5, one of the more kind of like frontier models right now. So this will incur some costs. So if you are experimenting with this, what you may want to do is also just pick a cheaper model, like a cheaper, faster model, knowing that the results will not maybe be as good. But this can easily become like $1 to $2 probably, something like that per query. So just something to keep in mind. Also, when you calculate the business case, there are still tons of improvements that we can do to this in order to speed this up and to make it cheaper. But for now, this is a good one. So let's run this and then come back to what we got going on over here. And then what I still need to do is we had some changes. So now I was on the development branch, right? I had some changes and now I want to update this again. And I haven't set it up right now where it has an automated CI/CD pipeline, meaning that when I push to a branch, that it will automatically redeploy. So I'm going to show you right now how we can manually push to the backend and the frontend so that as you continue to work on this app, you can keep updating it. So let's come over to the guides to the railway deployment and let's see, where was it? Okay, so we can see that here in the deployment document. So this is, it shows you what you need to run if you do this manually via the CLI, if you do this for the first time. But you can also do this exactly the same if you want to redeploy, right? So we use the Railway CLI, so it's Railway up. Then for the backend, we link to the backend folder. Then we use these params. We link our project, and then we detach it. So these are the two commands that we can run. So if I now come in here, and let's clean this up, and let's see, make sure we're in the root, so we can actually run this. I'm simply copy pasting this, just seeing how this goes right now, because we made some changes. Let's see, index, build logs. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so you can see this is now building again. So just checking where. Okay, so yeah, I think this is currently what's active. You can see this is the active deployment, and then this is now what's building. So this is just the command that I ran, and it's just overwriting everything again with the new changes. So we can also do exactly the same for the front end. So let's come back, clear this up, and deploy the front end. And let's see, there we go. That is now also, look, you can see that's also building. This is completed. So now server started again. Great. So this whole world of deployments, it's once you get the hang of it, it doesn't really matter which platform you really work with, because you understand the principles, right? But the first time, maybe it's the first time you're doing something like this, it's like black magic. Like you have no idea what's going on, right? But like, if I can give you one mental model around this, it's you work on something locally. You have the startup commands, right, to start both the backend and the frontend application, like we did in this project. And deploying is nothing more than pushing all that code to some kind of like cloud server, cloud compute, which is just a computer that you're renting somewhere else that's always on. You put your code there and you run the startup command. That's pretty much what it is. Now, there's usually one other thing that always needs to be done, and that is variables, right? So you can see this is our backend. We have all our secrets, all of our environment variables. Now, I can add those manually, so I can create a new variable, and I can say, let's say if we want an entropic, let's say API key, because we want to use entropic as well, we can add that here. Now, the MCP server added this for me. Again, not really recommended to let an MCP and let an AI agent handle all of this, but again, I'm going to nuke all of this, so that's why we're doing this. It's usually better to do like, okay, here you can see all my credentials again. You can also, so you can use the raw editor in here, and you can simply copy paste everything that you have locally. So boom, you copy it over. And then this is also where you can make a distinction between parameters or secrets that you run in production versus what you run locally. Again, if you have different database, different API keys that you want to use, that's what you can do over here. And then same, look, here's the front end is also updated again. So this also succeeded. And here you can see also the variables. This is all similar to literally what we have locally, right? So we had that over here. You can see these. And then the only thing to keep in mind, because we are working locally here, you can see the Fight API base URL is on localhost. And I assume that this is the URL from the backend. Because now it's not connecting with localhost, but it's connecting with our backend, which is hosted under that URL. So probably same over here. Let's see, database URL. That's all the same. Okay. So that's how the whole deployment side of things works with render. Now, there's a lot more that we can do. If I dive into the settings over here, you can, for example, see like this is ideally, let's just see if this works, because it was now in the US. For me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Right now, I'm probably on a free plan. Like you can see, I have 30-day left. I'm just using some credits in here. If you need the beefier like CPU or more memory, you can increase that. I think for this project, it's fine. Although 1 gig of memory is a little bit on the low end. So especially like if this were an application with 40 users, like lots of chats and all of that, you probably want to bump that up to 4. That's usually our default, that we, so two vCPUs and then 4 gigs of RAM. Usually good enough. So the whole deployment now works pretty much via those Docker files. So it auto detects those Docker files. So that's something to keep in mind, because in those Docker files that we have both in the front end and in the back end, which I didn't really quite cover, the AI created those, but here you can see this is what essentially sets up the environment, right? So you can see it gets, so this is for the front end. So it gets the dependencies, it installs everything, and then let's see, it does the build. And that's pretty much all that's needed on the front end. And then on the back end, you can see, again, gets Python. It, it gets UV. So it installs UV. We make sure we set up the virtual environment. And then again, we expose via port 8000. And then here's the command, right? We run UVcorn app main app. And this is how then the application starts running. So Docker is just, with Docker, this is just a simple way to set this up so we can kind of like avoid that problem of, hey, it runs on my machine and not on the deployment, right? But there's always a little bit of tinkering in order to set it up correctly in the beginning. Cool. So now let's come back to our, let's first refresh this, because remember we did a new deployment. This all still works. So here you can see the NVIDIA question, right? So you can see it has all the sources cited. We can click on it. We can see it. We got the nice tables over here. I mean, this is fancy. Like, this is actually really cool. This is starting to look like something like for a first like proof of concept that you could ship towards a client, right? We've done smaller builds than this for clients. So I'm quite happy with how we're progressing so far. All right, so I think now is the perfect time to zoom out a little bit again and bring a little bit more structure again to everything that we've done, because I can fully imagine when you followed along, like, things have been a little bit messy, right? And that was on purpose. This is what development looks like in the real world. It is messy. It's not as like, here's exactly what I want to do and then go there in a straight line. So if we now come back to our original architecture diagram, we have implemented everything, which is quite insane that we did that in one single YouTube video. I mean, if you follow this and if you copy this and show it as a portfolio project on your resume or something like that, like, it will greatly increase the chances of you being hired anywhere. Because not a lot of people know how to work on applications across the full stack. Because usually when you have a job, you are focused on like more of a vertical, right? So you either are like a front-end developer, you're a back-end engineer, you're, I don't know, a data engineer, and you're a DevOps engineer. Like, these are separate worlds. So not a lot of people know how all of this ties together. So we now have a public URL where users can log in. They can access their own chats, and we can start to ask questions where all of our data lives in the remote database that's hosted on Supabase. We created the tables originally in Python. So in our backend, in the app, in the database, we had all of our models, right? So we mapped them out in Python using SQL Alchemy. And then through Alembic and the migrations, we've been able to sync those with the database. Also, big unlock. A lot of people have no idea that you can do this, and they manually kind of like tinker with the database. And then if something changes, they have to do this as well. It's a complete game changer. Using Alembic in order to sync all of this. Okay, then we set up both the backend and the front end. We set it up in a single mono repository with very strict agent files, so we could leverage AI in a way that can quickly move back and forth between the two services and always reason over the full context. Then we started to work on the whole document ingestion pipeline, where we had to deal with HTML files. And we used Docling in order to parse this, but then run into some issues with the tables and created a custom table extractor so that when we look at the sources, we actually see nicely parsed data. Great improvement. Then we continued to put everything really into our database. So we have the document tables, we have the source documents, and eventually we had the chunks, which were set up with a vector embedding and also with a full text search. So we can combine the hybrid search, right? So that's the whole pipeline over here. And we used OpenAI to create those embeddings. So those were all of the individual pieces of the puzzle. And then we brought everything together and created a very sophisticated search agent, really. Let me come back, because that is, I want to show it to you over here one more time. Where are we? We need to go to development and we go to the backend app assistant. Where is it? Is it retrieval? I think it's this one. Yes. We created a very sophisticated retrieval algorithm using multiple techniques in order to bring everything together. And we used Pydantic AI to create an agent, with a set of tools. So the search process is not as naive and linear, where it just grabs something and then gets it back. Now the agent can also reason in a loop with search filing, read chunks, read chunk, and read surrounding chunks. So we give it a little bit more time. That's also why you see that when you ask a question, coming over here, let's create, this is localhost again, do it here. That's also why you see that when we ask a question, you can see it takes some time. So you can see it's going to search, and then later on it's going to do another search. That's that process in there. We're trading speed and cost also really for better, more grounded answers. This is a trade-off that you have to make on every project. How fast do we want it to be? How accurate do we need to be? And this can be a whole optimization process on its own. And then we brought everything together using Railway, where I've shown you how you can deploy a backend, a frontend, how to let the two talk to each other, and even connect to the database. And that's really how you build a full stack GenAI project. And regardless really of what you work on, what stack you use, what deployment strategy you use, what database you use, all of the components, really, all of the things that we covered are going to be elements that you'll often see in most of the projects that you work on. So most serious AI engineering projects, the projects that we do for clients, will include some type of front end. You have a backend and you have a database. And when there's data, there's almost always data involved. It doesn't necessarily always have to be that it needs to be factorized, but there's always this issue of parsing data. So now we've grounded it a little bit, again, in more like into the process. So that may like put some things into place. But what's next, right? We're now heading towards the end of this video. This is around a 4-hour video, but really, if you think about like an actual project, this is only just the beginning. Now think about this, right? So if we take on a client solution like this, usually we plan out the first phase for like over 2 weeks. That's usually the starting point where we say, look, in 2 weeks we can build you like a solid proof of concept. And literally all of these building blocks over here, all of the purple blocks, we kind of like rushed over them, right? Remember, for each phase, we created a plan. We had the to-do list. Coming back over here, so the to-dos we had. So this is now also done, by the way. I will make sure to update that and cross that off. So for each phase, we had a simple little plan, right? And then we just told the AI agent, okay, go work on this. But usually in reality, you'll spend at least a day on any one of those purple building blocks. And that already is really quick. Like before AI, this would take way longer. But now, like, spending a full day on everything is really what you need to do in order to fully grasp this. Because as you've seen, as we started working on things, we noticed it especially during the assistant, right? Where it already implemented way more than I originally thought. I had no idea it was going to implement all of those tools. I thought it was going to be a naive one, naive searches first. All of these underlying tools, like read surrounding chunks, I have not validated what this is doing. And you need to, right? Because this is literally the core of how your solution works, like how it's going to look into the data, what it's going to look at, what context it's going to make available for the LLM, the prompts. I have not written a single or optimized a single word in this entire prompt. These are all things that you now need to dive into and spend some time and ask AI, how does this work? And keep on asking, how does it work? Explain in simpler terms until you really understand it from first principles. That's really the only way that you can do this, I would say, professionally as a freelancer, as an AI engineer, and get paid for this over the long time and build a career around this. There is still, even with how good AI is getting, you cannot shortcut this. You cannot vibe code your way to a solution like this. Because think about it, for these analysts, the difference between a solution that sometimes hallucinates or just randomly makes stuff up versus something that just like always works is going to be night and day. If you deliver something and it like messes up, like you're out. You can do that one time and you're out. You're out of a job. So what I actually recommend next, if you've liked this and you want to continue with this, I would say take this whole project, and like it also depends on how you've followed along with this, right? There's a high chance you followed along with me. Maybe you were just watching, maybe you're coding on the side. But I would say start fresh again and start with a new data set, because that is going to change everything. Because you can keep optimizing this hypothetical use case, but ultimately, in order, like the real test of a solution like this is coming in here, asking a question, reading this answer, and then validating whether this is correct. Now, I don't have the time, energy, or the interest really to start analyzing all of these annual reports from these companies. I simply don't care about that because that is not my job. So ideally what you do is you find either someone that has a similar problem, or you find a data set that you are interested in, that you are familiar with, so that you can actually start to fact check things. Because that's what needs to be done right now. First, we need to understand, look, what is it coming back with? How is it responding? How long is it taking? And then we need to go through the entire process of looking at all of the individual chunks. You can see right now, I think there's definitely like, I probably should have nuked, because I think it uploaded these 3 times. This is way too much chunks. I think I should have nuked the database and kind of like do a fresh upload again. So that's something you have to keep in mind. So that's one of those things, right? Now I notice this. Now I need to spend some time figuring out, okay, what's going on over here? Then I need to look at those tables and really validate, okay, how is this logic? How are we parsing those tables? Is that actually correct? Then we have all of those source documents, right? Is this all up to date? Do we have... Yeah, okay, so we have the users in here. That is set up right now. The chat messages, that's all good. The chat threads. So that's how you naturally progress through that, right? And then we have inside the project, of course, we have all of the prompts. We have the tools that you use. You often, what you'll find in production systems is that, let me see. If we go, let's go back to the retrieval, is what you can do is depending on, let's see, on the backend, on the type of question that comes in. This retrieval. Yeah. So right now, regardless of what people ask, it's going to go through this whole pipeline, right? So I can perfectly demonstrate that if I start a new chat and I say, hey there, what can you help me with? Okay. It may be that it corrects already like quite straightforward because it has the tool calls, but let's see what it does. Because so it is going to search the filings, right? So it is now instructed to always search the data. So this is probably going to take like a minute or so to ask to get me an answer to this question. It's okay. Well, it was quite quick, but it's still like referenced this is bullshit, right? We don't need a reference for this. So this is the first thing that users will complain about, because if you put this in the hand of real people, they have no idea this works. So they are going to say hi, hey, and they test it, and it's like, yeah, it takes too long, and it's not quick enough. We've had that plenty of times. So what you then need to do is you need to go into your agent and you need to adjust this and the instructions to pretty much say, look, if people ask simple questions, you can answer directly based on, and you can even specify some guidelines on how it should handle the question. Now you can do that, but you could even say before we do kind of like the parallel prep, there is one more step in between here, and that's like query classification. So we check, okay, what kind of question is this? Is this a really deep kind of like analytical question where we need this whole thing? Is this a quick question that we can just answer straight from the from like the prompt, the system prompt that we have? Is this a follow-up question? Because also often what people will do is, of course, coming back to this, they'll get these answers, they'll read through it, and they may have a specific question on Azure AI or something like that. They want to know more about that. Now, then ideally, the AI agent, probably we need to configure the pipeline a little bit different so it kind of like can hone in on that, right? It will probably work well, but it's going to do the entire search again. It's going to do the whole process. And for that, we probably need to have a more like focused and more tailored search tool. These are just some things top of mind that I want to explain to you to kind of like understand that this is not the final point, that this is literally only just the beginning. And this right now is where the actual AI engineering starts. And with that, we have come to the end of this video, a little bit of a different one. If you made it all the way to the end, I appreciate you. I hope that you found it valuable. If so, again, make sure to please leave a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. Going through this and experiencing this with me, this is the real engineering process. There are not a lot of videos like this on YouTube. Most of it is very like quickly paced or just focused on how to like use these AI coding tools. But as you see, if you understand your stack and what you're working with, using these AI tools is literally as straightforward as asking a question. I don't really believe in all of these like huge agentic setups that a lot of people like showcase, where they have all these like customized skills and these crazy loops and things that go on. It's like, if I look at like most of the most capable engineers around me, like we just use the tools. And right now, Codex is better. Like I use Codex. Like in this video, I used Cursor. Also works really good. Probably in the future, Anthropic will make a leap again, and then that's better. And I just switch. I just use the tools. So I hope that this has been able to give you a sneak preview inside really what it's like to build a real project, full stack, all of the components, how they work together. I remember when I started my career, mostly like coming from a data science background and learning Python. Once I got kind of like comfortable with just running Python locally, I quickly understood that there's a whole other world that I was so unfamiliar with. That whole world of, okay, look, Frontend, like how does that work? How do we do? How does it talk together? Databases, how does that work? And then, of course, bringing everything together in a deployment and making it actually available. I think it literally took me like 5 or 6 years in order to fully understand that. AI really ramped that up, right? So that is now also why I am able to work on front-end projects like this, and like just chuck that in there. But it took me a really long time to get to this point where you are already at right now, if you followed everything. So yeah, with that, thank you all for watching. And let me know in the comments what you think about these types of things. And if there's any other type of project that you want me to do an end-to-end build on, and who knows, we can do that in the future. And then I'll see you in the next one.